Chapter 986. During this winter break, she had a very fulfilling time. Even though she had homework for the winter break, under her father's urging, she still set aside a few days' time to finish it early. After that, she went with her father to the Mantis Shrimp Animation Production Company. First, she received training from the great dubbing uncles and aunties. Next, she recorded Sister Elsa's voice. As she only had to dub scenes of Elsa's childhood, the workload was not too heavy and would not tire her out, so she was able to maintain a very high level of enthusiasm towards the end. After the dubbing work was completed, the Spring Festival was approaching. Last year, as Tong Tong was still too young, Yang Yi did not return to his hometown for the Spring Festival. But this year, Yang Yi brought his wife and child back to Anqing early. Compared to Yang Huan, who was working hard on the recording of the Limit Challenge, and would only return home later, Yang Yi and Murphy did not seem like superstars at all. How could a superstar have so much free time? Yang Yi had become very popular recently. On one hand, it was because the 2 songs he released in Harbor City had finally spread their influence to the mainland. Although not everyone could understand Cantonese songs, those media outlets who understood them were still bragging about Yang Yi. They said that Yang Yi's 2 songs had a prominent position in Harbor City's music industry, and were considered to be rare hits. They also said that Yang Yi had become the most beloved artist in Harbor City. A lot of people were crying and begging for Yang Yi to go to Harbor City to develop his career. Of course, there was some bragging involved in all of this. It greatly satisfied the vanity of many of the onlookers. As the newspaper sales increased, Yang Yi also received close attention from the media. Besides the new song, news of Yang Yi becoming popular again overseas was also spread by the media. Speaking of which, Yang Yi becoming popular again overseas had nothing to do with Yang Yi himself. The person behind the scenes was SBC television station. That's right, it was the American television station that had purchased the rights to the voice. At the same time, it was also the television station that produced and broadcast the variety show, Undercover Tracking. Last summer, when Yang Yi bumped into the cast of Undercover Tracking in the United States, the footage from that episode was broadcasted recently. SBC TV purposely covered it up tightly. Knowing that the audience had discovered a surprise in the show, they made a special program to introduce the cameraman's unintentional recording of Yang Yi's romantic singing of Nothing's Wrong with You. Yang Yi had already asked Wilson to arrange for this song to be released in the United States. Last year, it even topped the charts for several weeks. However, the audience still couldn't help but be moved by Yang Yi, who was playing and singing this song in the square. What could be more romantic than singing such a song for your wife in a crowd? Other than being moved, when the audience calculated the time, they were surprised to discover that this unintentional recording by the cameraman was actually the first time this song was released to the public. Of course, in the later part of the program, Yang Yi cleverly arranged for Germain and Hill to avoid being tracked by the hunters. This also made the audience exclaim in admiration. After all, when SBC later produced a decryption program, they even solemnly informed the audience that Yang Yi had indeed participated in the program without knowing about it. Luckily, at that time, Yang was not famous yet. Later on, when we contacted him, he did not intend to ask for an appearance fee from us. Otherwise, our program budget would have been greatly increased. The host said humorously. Of course, with the cooperation between Yang Yi and SBC on The Voice, Yang Yi would not go against SBC over such a small matter. Here, it should be mentioned that the first batch of overseas copyright for The Voice was only bought by SBC in the United States, and an Australian television station with Chinese connections. Yang Yi made a small profit from this and believed that if this program became popular in the United States and Australia, the copyright would continue to be sold to other countries. Because of SBC's help, news of Yang Yi becoming popular in the United States was also reported by the domestic media. They proudly expressed that the American people were all amazed and felt that Yang Yi was a genius producer. In terms of news popularity, Murphy was not inferior to Yang Yi at all. After all, Yang Yi's popularity was due to his reputation, while Murphy's popularity was due to the many accolades her record, Words of Desire, had received. After New Year's Day, the media kept reporting that Murphy or her songs had been nominated or won some awards. It could really be said that Murphy had received too many awards. Even though she had never attended any award ceremonies before, with such heaven-defying results, it was impossible for the organizers not to award the award to Mo Xiaowan, who had come to collect it on her behalf. Something worth mentioning was that Murphy's name was not included in the Spring Festival Gala's program list that was recently exposed by the media. The Spring Festival Gala's production team was scolded badly by the netizens. A Chinese music superstar like Murphy was not even qualified to be invited to the Spring Festival Gala? Actually, the Spring Festival Gala's production team was really wronged. They had taken the blame for Murphy, who said that they did not invite Murphy. The Spring Festival Gala's executive director had personally called to invite Murphy to the Spring Festival Gala in mid-December last year. However, Murphy did not agree and politely declined the other party's invitation. On New Year's Eve, she had to accompany Yang Yi back to his hometown. That was much more important than participating in the Spring Festival Gala. Moreover, what could be happier than being with your family on such an important holiday? After Murphy's promotional period for her new album ended, her workload also decreased sharply. She might not even have a single announcement in a week. Fans who were always paying attention to Murphy's movements also complained. Can you two not be so lazy? You're not participating in commercial performances, programs, or Spring Festival Gala. Are you still celebrities? She did not look like a celebrity at all. Fans even said that Yang Huan looked more like a celebrity than they did. Speaking of Yang Huan, this was also the year that Yang Huan broke out. After Drawing Sword was released, Yang Huan's fans at micro-broadcasting soared again. After Drawing Sword was broadcast, it became the most popular TV series. People all over the country, regardless of gender or age, waited to watch Li Yunlong on Central TV every night. Shen Wanni's performance as Li Yunlong was recognized by the audience. He had indeed portrayed the vulgar, witty, and brave General Li Yunlong in their hearts. However, the other actors also acted well. Among them was Yang Xiuqin, played by Yang Huan. Although Yang Huan did not live for more than a few episodes in the series, and was only a supporting actress, she portrayed Xiuqin's simplicity, sincerity, and straightforwardness to the fullest. When the episode where Xiuqin sacrificed herself with the enemy on the city wall was broadcasted, many viewers who already knew that Xiuqin was going to die could not help but shed tears. The next day, the media gave Yang Huan a high evaluation for her performance. Yang Huan is not acting as Xiuqin. She is Xiuqin. The report analyzed Yang Huan's rural background and pointed out the similarities between Yang Huan and Xiuqin. Furthermore, through Yang Huan's performance in the Limit Challenge, they analyzed Yang Huan's personality and pointed out that there were many similarities between Yang Huan and Xiuqin. It was no wonder that Yang Huan could bring Xiuqin to life. In the report, the reporter also mentioned something interesting. Back then, Yang Huan went to the audition without telling Yang Yi. The famous director, Chen Fengchen, did not even know that Yang Huan was Yang Yi's sister. However, after seeing Yang Huan's performance, Chen Fengchen felt as if he had seen the real Xiuqin, and decided to give the role to Yang Huan on the spot. At that time, no one believed Chen Fengchen's words at the press conference. Everyone thought that Yang Huan had gotten in through the back door. Now, it seemed that Chen Fengchen had a good eye for talent. The winter vacation passed by quickly. Xixi and her parents returned from their hometown for the spring festival. Their holiday balance was running low. Chapter 987. Papa, my piggy bank is full. It can't fit any more. On the morning of the second day after they returned from their hometown, Xixi ran downstairs. While she was still on the stairs, the little girl's energetic voice could be heard in the living room. This was the first thing Xixi did after she came back. She put her New Year's money into her piggy bank. In the past years, Murphy would rob the little girl of her money and only leave a few dozen yuan for Xixi. Although Murphy did not spend Xixi's money, she would deposit it into a separate bank account for Xixi. However, this year was different. Xixi, who was already 6.5 years old, had a little self-awareness. Although she was still very dependent on her parents, the little girl had begun to consciously separate her money and her things clearly. Therefore, when she was in her hometown, when Mo Fei said that she wanted to take away her New Year's money, she refused to give it to her mother. You're still young. It's not safe to carry so much money with you. What if you lose it? Murphy tried to scare her. Or, what if the big bad wolf hears that you have so much money and steals your money on the way? She was not that stupid. She giggled and said, the big bad wolf won't steal money. It will only eat people. However, what her mother said made sense. She was also worried that she would lose so much money. Last year, the uncles in the village made a lot of money because the road was repaired. The red packets they gave to Shishi and Tong Tong were much thicker. After all, they were the children of Yang Yi, who had done them a great favor. Of course, Yang Yi would only give their children more New Year's money. Shishi was worried about keeping so much money by herself. What should she do? In the end, Shishi decided to entrust her father with her money and let him take care of it for her. What was the difference between this and letting her mother take it away? But Shishi trusted her father. The little girl believed that her father would not take her money and not return it. Her father did not let her down. After returning home, he took out all of Shishi's red envelopes and asked her to save them. However, the problem now was that Shishi's piggy bank was already full of money. After Shishi stuffed a few bills into it, it couldn't hold any more. The piggy bank is full? Yang Yi looked at Shishi nodding her little head like a chick pecking at rice. He smiled and said, what are you going to do? Daddy will buy you another piggy bank? Or do you want me to take all the money out and deposit it in the bank for you? There were already 3 piggy banks in Cece's room. They were all the pocket money she had saved up. Why do you want to deposit money in the bank? The little girl couldn't sit still. She propped her 2 little arms on the sofa and swung back and forth like a swing. She held back her energy and asked her father curiously. Because if you leave the money at home, it will still be the same amount no matter how many years pass. If you deposit it in the bank will give you interest. If you deposit it for a long time, when you withdraw it in the future, it will be much more than if you leave it at home. Yang Yi smiled and said to Shishi, although it wasn't a very good idea to deposit money in the bank, it was indeed the most suitable way for children to manage their finances at this stage. Will it increase? Shishi couldn't help but stop what she was doing. She looked at her father with her mouth open in surprise. Yang Yi simply took the large whiteboard that he usually used to teach Shishi at home. He calculated on it for Shishi. Using intuitive numbers, he demonstrated to the little girl how much extra money she would receive after 3 years of deposit of 1,000 yuan in the bank. It just so happened that this was also a small mathematics lesson for Shishi. 3 years of fixed deposit and withdrawal, the bank will give 75% interest. This sentence means that for 100 yuan, we can get 75% interest every year. Then if we have 1,000 yuan, how much interest will we get every year? Yang Yi asked with a smile. Shishi had just learned the law of multiplication and division in mathematics and hadn't learned how to use it flexibly. Therefore, the little girl blinked her beautiful long eyelashes and whispered, 1,000 yuan, 1,000 yuan. However, she still couldn't understand. Isn't 1,000 yuan equivalent to 100 yuan bills? Yang Yi drew the image of 100 yuan bill on the whiteboard with a few strokes and then wrote X10 next to it. Shishi nodded her little head hurriedly. This was more intuitive, so she immediately understood. Then 1,000 yuan, the interest for a year is 75 x 10, which is 50 yuan. Is that right? In order to let Shishi understand this multiplication operation, Yang Yi even wrote down the process of the operation for Shishi to see. Shishi looked at it attentively and forgot to speak. Now that Shishi also received a large amount of new information, her brain seemed to be a little overwhelmed. After calculating the interest of 1,000 yuan for 3 years for Shishi again, Yang Yi gave a number. 82.5. In other words, if you deposit 1,000 yuan in the bank and withdraw it after 3 years, you will have an extra 80 yuan. Wow! Shishi clasped her 2 little hands in front of her, her 2 eyes emitting little stars as she exclaimed softly. He didn't know if she felt that the extra money was a lot or if she felt that her father was amazing. Of course, Yang Yi didn't care about the small interest of the bank, but Shishi didn't have such a concept. She only felt that her money could be increased by putting it in the bank, which was indeed a good thing. Papa, then I don't want the piggy bank anymore. I want to save all the money. The little girl recovered from the complicated mathematical operation, happily took her father's hand, and couldn't wait to say, "Then we have to take out all the money first." Yang Yi smiled and said, "Calculate how much money you have in total now." Yang Yi went upstairs and took down the 3 pink piggy banks with Xi. Yang Yi held one in each hand, and Xi, who followed her father, also held one in her arms. In addition, she was happily holding a small bag of money. This was her New Year's money. They began to work. On the big table in the side hall, they opened the piggy bank and took out all the money inside. It had to be said that Xi did save a lot of money in the past few years, although part of it had been deposited in the bank by Murphy. The scattered banknotes taken out from the 3 piggy banks piled up into a small mountain. So much. Papa, look, so much. Xi excitedly stepped on the chair, waved her small hands to her father, and giggled. Yang Yi just smiled and didn't say anything. Most of Xi's money was scattered pocket money. 1 yuan and 5 yuan accounted for most of it, and there was also a part of big banknotes. 10 yuan, 20 yuan, 50 yuan. It did seem a lot, but in fact, how do I count it? Yang Yi didn't intend to do everything for Xi. He smiled and guided her. First, you have to classify the money. For example, put a 100 yuan note in this one, and a 50 yuan note in this one. You have to smooth and tidy each note, so that it will be more convenient to count later. Xi listened attentively. Although her father didn't help her count, Xi felt very motivated to organize these small amounts of money. Chapter 988. Here's 10 yuan, here's 5 yuan, and here's 1 yuan. In the living room, the little girl was energetically organizing her money. As she did so, she muttered softly to herself. On the table, more than half of the banknotes that were originally piled up like a mountain were gone. In front of Cici, stacks of neatly sorted banknotes were also stacked up. Cici's good performance made her father, who was watching from the side, reveal a satisfied look in his eyes. Originally, Yang Yi was worried that Cici would randomly arrange the bills when she sorted them out. This would cause the adjacent bills of different denominations to be mixed together. But in the end, the little girl performed very well. Not only did she sort the cash accurately, but she also arranged the cash neatly into a stack without anyone teaching her. It was very comfortable to look at like this. At this moment, Murphy's cheerful voice came from the living room. "Sister, what are you doing? We're here to visit you." Yang Yi turned his head and saw Tong Tong with a cartoon bib on his front. He had a silly smile on his face as he ran to the living room. Murphy followed behind him with a smile, holding a small bowl in her hand. Ever since this little guy played wild at his grandparents' house, he started to eat restlessly. Murphy even had to chase after him to feed him. This time, Tong Tong must have heard the sound of his sister counting the money, and was attracted to come over. He walked over curiously and looked up at his sister, who was using her but to prop herself up on the chair. However, from his angle he couldn't see what his sister was doing. Perhaps because his sister ignored him for a long time, Tong Tong turned his head to look at his father in confusion. He pointed his finger at his sister. Although he didn't say anything, his expression seemed to be asking his father, "Why isn't my sister playing with me?" Yang Yi bent down and picked up Tong Tong, so that he could see more clearly. Murphy took the opportunity to come over and feed Tong Tong a spoonful of porridge. Tong Tong wasn't very interested in the money on his sister's table. He looked around and finally his eyes fell on the 3 pink piggy banks. "I want to play, Papa." His attention shifted from his sister to the piggy banks. He happily patted his father's hand and pointed at them. "Xi, little brother wants to see your piggy banks," Yang Yi said with a smile. Xi, who was busy sorting out her money, generously took out a piggy bank and handed it to her father. Yang Yi put Tong Tong down and let him play on the ground. Tong Tong excitedly climbed onto the piggy bank and rode it like a horse. Ignoring Tong Tong, Xi quickly sorted out her money. Under her father's guidance, she began to count the money. "Count 1 note at a time. Put the ones you have counted here. For every 10 notes, Use one note to hold them together. This way, it won't be easy to mix them up. Counting money was a very delightful thing. He saw the little girl counting very seriously, but there was always a cheerful smile on her little face. Her beautiful big eyes were smiling like crescent moons. In the end, she sorted out the amount of money to be 11,861 yuan. How could there be so much money? Didn't it look like there wasn't much money? It was true. Shishi's pocket money and the change her mother gave her every year for the New Year's money added up to about 2,000 to 3,000 yuan. However, Shishi's small bag contained this year's New Year's money. There were a lot of 100 yuan notes. The little girl had already received more than 2,000 yuan as New Year's money in her hometown. In addition, most of it was the red packet that Lanzhou's Kai Lai, who had stayed in Jiangcheng, gave Sisi after they came back yesterday. The red packet was filled with 6,666 yuan. However, the total amount was a little awkward. $11,861. It was not a round number. I'm still short of 139 yuan to get 12,000 yuan. Yang Yi said with a smile. He was originally going to say that he would use his own money to make up for Shishi's shortfall. However, Shishi listened to her father's calculation and her big eyes turned. She glanced at Tong Tong, who was having a hard time with her piggy bank, and a happy smile appeared on her face. Papa, little brother also has a lot of red packets. Let's take little brother's money. The little girl pointed at Tong Tong and said in a clear voice. Tong Tong's money was saved in the end. Although Shishi's money could be increased to a bigger round number after taking Tong Tong's red packet, Yang Yi still stopped Shishi from reaching out her evil little hand to her little brother. He used his own money to let Shishi collect 12,000 yuan. Since there was nothing else to do today, Yang Yi took Shishi to the bank to deposit money. They received a number and waited in the lobby. Shishi felt that all of this was very new to her. Her father had never taken her to the bank before. After all, Yang Yi was a rich man. When did he need to go to the bank personally to deposit money? The little girl sat in the lobby of the bank and looked around excitedly. How old is your daughter? An old lady sitting next to her asked Yang Yi with a smile. She was very fond of Shishi's clever and cute appearance. Most of the people lining up at the counter in the bank were middle-aged and old people, or company salespeople who were there to do business. The old lady next to Yang Yi was holding a passbook in her hand. She was probably not there to withdraw money, but to collect money. Nowadays, young people basically didn't do business at the counter. They thought that it was too troublesome to line up. They either used ATM or directly used online banking, which was popularized by the Sahara Online Mall in recent years. However, the old people didn't accept new things so easily. They were more willing to do business at the counter according to the rules. Even if they wanted to withdraw 100 or 200 yuan, they still had to line up and watch the teller work for them. This way, they would feel more at ease. Yang Yi smiled at the old lady and said, "She is over 6 years old this year." "Oh, I have a grandson who is a little older than her, but not so tall. He is 8 years old this year, and is in the 2nd grade. The old lady chatted with Yang Yi. Soon, it was Yang Yi's turn to do business. Yang Yi and Shishi said goodbye to the old lady and came to the counter. She is the one doing business. Today, I will take her to deposit the New Year's money she has saved in the past few years into the bank. Yang Yi smiled and said to the teller behind the glass window. He let Shishi sit on the high chair and stood beside her. No problem. Hello, little girl. The teller smiled and greeted Shishi. The little girl shyly grabbed the counter, sat on the high chair, and moved her little butt. She didn't know how to respond. She had never talked to others through the glass. Come, this is your bank card. In the past, your mother also put your money in it. You put it in so that Auntie can get it from inside. Yang Yi took out a bank card and handed it to Shishi. You can't call me Auntie, call me sister. The teller didn't recognize Yang Yi, but she still cared about the name and quickly said with a smile. This time, Shishi finally saw the source of the sound. It came from a small black box stuck on the glass. Sister, this is for you. Shishi followed her father's instructions and put the bank card in the groove and said sweetly, Little girl, you want to save money, right? The teller took the card and said with a smile, You can bring the money first. We will count the money first, and then you can deposit the money. But we have already counted it at home, she said with some puzzlement. It's like this, little girl. We also have to count it again. You can check the final number with your own calculation, and see if we are right. The teller patiently explained. The teller had seen a lot of these children who were brought here by their parents to save money. Although they didn't save much money, and some of them only saved dozens or hundreds of yuan. And it might even be a pile of change, which was simply a burden to them. But the bank still asked the teller to be gentle and patient. After all, leaving a good impression on these children is also to cultivate future customers for the bank. Chapter 989. Take the money out and put it in here for your sister. Yang Yi reminded Shishi. The little girl nodded obediently. She turned her small backpack around, unzipped it, and took out a thick stack of change. At home, her father had helped her tie up the different amounts of money with a rubber band. This way, it wouldn't be easy for the money to fall apart in her backpack. Don't ask why Yang Yi let Shishi carry so much money in her small backpack. In fact, there was no hidden danger. How could Yang Yi not consider these problems? Yang Yi drove, so there wouldn't be any danger on the way from home to the bank. After getting out of the car, Yang Yi found an excuse to help Shishi carry her small backpack. He didn't pass the backpack to Shishi until they got a number, and sat in the bank to wait. When the counter staff saw Sisi try to put the big bundle of change into the groove, a light of understanding flashed in her eyes. Although she still had a smile on her face and didn't show it, she still sighed in her heart. Sure enough. But the next scene made her dumbfounded. After putting the first bundle of change into the slot, Shishi didn't give up. She took out another bundle of money from her backpack. When everyone thought that was all she had, Shishi began to take out money again. This time, it was a big stack of red money. At this moment, the teller's heart was racing. She wanted to cry but had no tears. Are the children nowadays so rich? And looking at Shishi's actions, she didn't seem to want to stop. The teller grabbed the big bundle of money that Shishi had stuffed into her hands, and silently weighed it. At the same time, she made a comparison between Shishi's New Year's money and the hundreds of yuan that she had shamelessly received this year. Wah! In her heart, the teller was so sad that she burst into tears. After depositing the money, Shishi handed the card to her father for safekeeping. She happily held the deposit receipt and couldn't wait to go home. Then she ran to her mother. The little girl giggled and spread out her hands. Mom, look, I've saved a lot of money. Good. I hope you become a millionaire soon. Murphy looked at the little girl who was showing off in front of her, and reached out to rub Shishi's little head in annoyance. If someone could read minds, they would probably be able to see Murphy muttering in her heart. Humph, it's not even a fraction of what I have. After she was done showing off to her mother, she went upstairs to her bedroom. She wanted to put the deposit receipt in her treasure chest, where she kept some interesting things. However, at this time, the little girl glanced at the wooden chest that contained her gold coins. That's right, I still have some assets. The little girl sat down on the bed with her wooden chest in her arms, opened it, and began to count her gold pieces with a tinkling sound. Before the new year, because she diligently helped her father clean the house and pack the luggage, she still managed to save some gold coins. After counting, Shishi was pleasantly surprised to find that she had 26 gold coins. It's not even 100 gold coins, Shishi thought. The little girl had a bold idea in her heart. In February in Yangcheng, the spring was warm and the flowers were blooming. Although the traditional winter jasmine market had closed, the various parks, plazas, and other public places were still full of flowers. In this beautiful season, the local government of Yangcheng also held the Lingnam Book Festival to let the fragrance of books and flowers influence this beautiful city. Yuing also brought Yu Xiaowei and her mother to Yangcheng as guests. As one of the top 10 outstanding authors of last year by Sahara Publishing House, Yuing naturally had the qualifications to be chosen by Sahara Publishing House to participate in this festival. It was her first time participating in such a large-scale event, so Yuing was a bit overwhelmed. It had to be known that participating in the festival was not just a business event and signing autographs for fans. According to her editor Wen Xiefeng's schedule, Ewing also had to represent the author supported by the Children's Book Author Support Foundation, to give a keynote speech and also participate in an important author salon. These were all important processes for her to enter the ranks of famous authors. Of course, Ewing also understood that because her book Little Bubu's Adventure had sold so well, Sahara Publishing House was doing so much to package and promote her this year. Regardless of that, from the schedule, Ewing didn't have any plans today. She decided to bring her daughter and mother to Yangcheng's famous commercial pedestrian street to shop and buy some beautiful clothes. After all, they were all women. Coming to Yangcheng, how could they not shop and buy clothes? On the pedestrian street, they didn't feel tired at all as they went in and out of the shops. The whole way was filled with laughter, and even the shy Yu Xiaowei had a happy smile on her face. "Mom, let's go take a look at that, okay?" The little girl also mentioned her wish. She pointed to a boutique shop next to a milk tea shop, and said to her mother with great interest, "Let's go. Mom will buy you whatever you want to buy today." Yu Ying's wallet had been bulging over the past few months. Although she couldn't bear to spend extravagantly, she had saved up the money to buy a few more houses for the time being. She still spoke very generously at this time. In the boutique shop, Yu Xiaowei held her mother's hand and looked left and right. She was a bit dazzled by all the beautiful little accessories and small pendants. But in the end, her gaze still landed on a row of small and exquisite teru dolls. The others were a bit too bright and exquisite, and could even be said to be gaudy. On the contrary, these teru dolls with simple designs and simple colors and patterns were more suited to Yu Xiaowei's taste. The smiling face that was outlined with 3 curved lines was extremely simple. The only color was the neck. Some parts had a small blue hook line, some had a small red hook line, and the rest were pure white. Needless to say, these small and exquisite teru dolls were really quite pretty. Yu Xiaowei reached out to touch them. They were made of ceramic, and her fingertips felt smooth and delicate to the touch. There was also a cool and comfortable feeling. This made the little girl love them even more. "Do you like them?" Seeing this, Ewing knew that her daughter was moved. She smiled and said, "You can buy a pair. They look quite nice hanging on your school bag." Yu Xiaowei pursed her lips and turned around. She was a little embarrassed as she asked her mother softly, "Mom, can I buy more? I want to give them to Xi and the others." Chapter 990. After the Spring Festival holiday, Phoebe Studio announced Murphy's nationwide concert tour to the public. This plan would last until the end of the year, which meant that there would be a total of 18 concerts throughout the year. Unlike the time when Murphy was in Tianmei Entertainment, this time Murphy's solo concerts were arranged in 18 different cities. Moreover, the locations of the cities were more evenly distributed. Whether it was the major cities in the east, the central and western cities, they were all covered. Even Taiwan and Hong Kong had one concert each. It could be said that it was a nationwide concert tour in the truest sense. However, after this plan was announced, the fans were pleasantly surprised, but they couldn't help but complain. "What? Only 18 concerts? That's too little. On average, there would only be one concert every 2 weeks?" Other famous singers like Chun Yijie, who was on the same level as Murphy, had 24 concerts this year, and they were already in full swing. Or a famous band group, last year had 27 concerts, and could be called a model worker. Even a male singer who was no longer popular, in a variety show, claimed that he had 32 concerts, even though these concerts might have been put together in some small cities. Murphy's nationwide concert tour. Why are there only 18 concerts? Are you worried that we fans don't have money to buy tickets? With Mo Fei's current popularity, not to mention 18 concerts, even if she held 38 concerts, she would still be able to get a full house. However, Murphy would rather choose a slow-paced concert, and she would rather go against the money. The fans loved and hated this, but they couldn't do anything about it. However, putting aside the low number of concerts, Mo Fei started to hold concerts. This was good news enough to make the fans who were looking forward to it ecstatically. Ever since Murphy released her new album, The First Dream, the fans' calls for her concerts were high. However, in the meantime, Murphy had left her original management company, got married, got pregnant again, and many other complicated matters. So Murphy's concerts had been delayed for more than 2 years. Now that Murphy had finally made a comeback and started holding concerts again, how could the fans not be so excited that they couldn't wait to fork out money to buy all the tickets for Murphy's concerts? Not to mention, MoFay only had 18 concerts, which were pitifully few. In addition to announcing Murphy's concert information, Phoebe Studios' official microbroadcasting also released a link to purchase tickets. Murphy's concert this year would adopt a new form of online ticket sales. Fans could purchase tickets by logging into the Sahara Online Mall's ticketing section. Currently, the tickets for Murphy's concert tour in Jiang City were on sale. Seeing this, many netizens still felt that it was very rare. Online ticket sales? How much advertising did this Sahara Online Mall give Murphy? However, for the time being, the online ticket sales were still limited in the name of testing. Only 2,000 tickets were released every day, and they were only sold to registered users who had completed the complicated questionnaire test, to put an end to scalpers. Even so, these 2,000 tickets were still sold out in less than a few minutes every day. After all, it was a new thing. The entertainment media also discussed the feasibility of selling concert tickets online with great interest. Murphy's concert also became one of the hottest topics recently. A few days in advance, after Yang Yi went to Huijia Primary School to register Shishi, the new semester was about to begin. However, in the last few days of the winter vacation, Yang Yi found that Shishi's behavior was a bit strange. The little girl was very hardworking. Although she would usually help her parents with some household chores in order to save up gold coins to exchange for dolls, the little girl was even more enthusiastic than before these few days. She even had the intention to work eagerly. Just like today when Murphy and Yang Yi were discussing what kind of flowers to plant in the flower bed this year, Shishi heard them. She was even happier than her mother. She quickly ran to the shoe cabinet and took out her beautiful water boots. "Mama, let me help you plant the flowers." Cece beamed with joy as she put on her water boots and ran over to her mother and said politely. Although Yang Yi and the others hadn't bought the flower plants back yet, they couldn't resist Shishi's enthusiasm. In the end, Yang Yi decided to take her to the yard to weed and loosen the soil. Murphy couldn't stay idle. She also put on her farming clothes and brought Tong Tong to join in the fun. Wearing gloves, she and Yang Yi were talking and laughing as they plucked the old flower stalks that were more laborious. Cece, on the other hand, followed behind and helped to pick up the dead branches and leaves that her parents had plucked up and put them into the garbage bin. Tong Tong was holding a toy shovel and wobbling behind his sister. He liked to play with mud and sand. When he saw his sister squatting down, he also bent down and used the shovel to dig up the soil. However, Tong Tong was still small and weak. After a while, he couldn't dig up a big piece of soil. Instead, he couldn't stand steadily and sat down in the flower bed. Yang Yi and Murphy both noticed Tong Tong's movement and wanted to pick him up. However, they didn't expect that the little guy, who had just sat down, would react quickly. He pressed his two little hands on the soil and got up. "So dirty." Tong Tong turned his head and looked at his little butt. He anxiously used his chubby little hands to pat away the grass and dirt on his pants. However, his hands were already dirty, so the more he patted, the dirtier his pants became. "Eee!" The little guy cried out in disgust. Murphy and Yang Yi looked at the little guy's clumsy appearance and laughed unkindly. "Haha. Okay, stop patting. Let's play first. Mommy will give you a bath later, and then you can change your clothes." Murphy smiled and tugged at Tong Tong's hand as she persuaded him. Housework was still very interesting. Although she wasn't as funny as Tong Tong, she was still very energetic. She was an energetic little girl, and her bright smile gave everyone a lot of positive energy. "Cece, push this basket of trash into the trash can at the back of our yard and dump it," Yang Yi instructed. "Okay." After hearing the little girl's crisp reply, a pretty and cute figure jumped up from the ground. She carried the bamboo basket that wasn't too heavy and placed it on a small handcart. Accompanied by a string of bell-like laughter, the little girl pushed the handcart and ran out in a flash. Seeing the little girl's energetic figure, Murphy was a little surprised and asked Yang Yi, "Why is she so happy today? Is it because school is starting soon?" Yang Yi shook his head and guessed, I don't think so. She's so eager to work. She must have taken a fancy to some soft toy and wants to earn some gold coins to exchange for it. After working hard in the morning, Shishi earned 2 gold coins. In the afternoon, Yang Luoqi, who had just returned from Yangcheng, invited Nan Jiaoyu to Shishi's house to play. When Lan Xian heard the news, she also ran over eagerly. However, apart from the fact that she wanted to play with her friends, Lan Xian had other intentions as well. Chapter 991. Lan Xian was short of money recently. It wasn't about real money. In terms of real money, Lan Xian could be said to be a real rich lady. The trust fund set up by Lan Haokai in her name had already reached 9 figures. Lan Xian only lacked gold coins that could be exchanged for food and television. Compared to Shishi, who was a landlord with more than 20 gold coins, Lan Xian really didn't have a single gold coin now. It was all because of the Spring Festival. During the Spring Festival, because Lan Xian's final exam results had improved a lot, Lan Haokai and Wu Jingjing were more tolerant of Lan Xian. Other than urging her to finish her winter homework, they didn't ask her to study or exercise anymore. Moreover, during such a big festival, Lan Xian ate and drank with her family and played everywhere. The little girl was completely overwhelmed by the comfortable feeling of reaping without sowing. The blissful days had caused Lan Xian to become lazy. When Wu Jingjing felt that something was wrong and urged her to exercise and study, Lan Xian would jest and change the topic abruptly, or act shamelessly and refuse to exercise. When it came to educating children, Wu Jingjing sometimes had to play the role of the bad guy at home. Seeing Lan Xian like this, she once again implemented the gold coin tactic from before. Lan Xian had to use gold coins to watch television. Moreover, if they didn't have enough gold coins, Lan Haokai and Wu Jingjing wouldn't bring Lan Xian along when they went out to eat a big meal. Lan Xian still wanted to be lazy. Before the Spring Festival, she had saved a small amount of money by doing her winter homework. However, no matter how much money she had saved, it couldn't support Lan Xian's spending. Just 2 days ago, on the day she came back from her hometown, Lan Xian comfortably stayed at home and watched television for the whole day. Her gold coins were completely used up. Without gold coins, although Lan Xian didn't have to worry about the crisis of food shortage for the time being, she couldn't watch television. She didn't like to read, so Lan Xian could only feel bored at home. Yesterday was really a torturous day. Today, Lan Xian's nimble little brain remembered the experience of watching television at Shishi's house. She was overjoyed and sneaked over to Shishi's house to play. Today, Yang Luoqi and Nan Jiaoyu also came to play with Shi. Lan Xian could also freeload some delicious snacks that Yang Yi had prepared for the children. She didn't know what her little friend was thinking. She was happily showing off the new things that she had learned to Yang Luoqi and Nan Jiaoyu. On the floor of the side hall, She brought over a lot of equipment. There were large plastic cups, small plastic cups, a big bottle of mineral water, and even her mother's electronic scale and a broken red brick. Shishi, why did you bring a brick over? Nan Zhaoyu sat on the floor with his legs crossed and asked in confusion. Because we want to do an experiment. Shishi giggled and said, What experiment? Nan Zhaoyu asked tirelessly. Aya, let me tell you. Lan Xian shouted and ran upstairs in a hurry. She ran to Shishi's bedroom and took down the book, Core Science Explanations. She proudly showed it to Nan Zhaoyu and said, Look, this is the book. There are many interesting experiments in it. Lan Xian came to Shishi's house and saw that Yang Yi and Shishi had done some experiments. However, with Lan Xian's personality, she only looked at it curiously. She didn't have a strong interest in trying it herself like Shishi did. However, at this moment, she felt as if she had learned these experiments before. She proudly showed off to Nan Zhaoyu and Yang Luoqi. It had to be said that the book's bright and colorful cover color was very attractive. Yang Luoqi reached out her hand expectantly and said, I want to see it. Shishi quickly reached out to stop her and said anxiously, No, you can't see it now. You have to wait until I finish the experiment. If she read it in advance, it would be like a magic trick being revealed. her experiment would be understood by them, and her experiment would lose its appeal. She still wanted to show off in front of her friends. Okay then. Young Luochi withdrew her hand and sat next to Shishi obediently, waiting for her to do the experiment. In fact, young Luochi was also very curious about Shishi's experiment with so much equipment on the floor. Not only them, but Tong Tong also sat at the side curiously, waiting to see his sister's performance. In the past, when his sister's friends came over, Tong Tong rarely had the chance to play with them. Now that Tong Tong could move around freely, even the castle could not hold him back. Therefore, when he saw his sister's lively side, Tong Tong naturally came over eagerly. Young Luochi liked Tong Tong very much. After she did not get the book, she retracted her hand and reached out to hug Tong Tong next to her. Her small hand rubbed Tong Tong's smooth and soft little face. It felt so good. Little Momo seemed to be enjoying it as well. She squinted her eyes comfortably in her sister's fragrant arms and grinned. No one knew what she was smiling about. That's right, we have to pour the water in here. Shishi diligently did the experiment alone for everyone to see. The little girl carefully grabbed the big plastic bottle of mineral water and poured it into the big plastic cup. That's about it. Don't pour too much. Then she placed the big plastic cup, which was half filled with water, on the electronic scale. The weight was quickly displayed on the scale. I know this is 53 kilograms. Nanjiayu rushed to shout. He was quite eager to show off. Shishi took the plastic cup and placed the small brick on it. This is 53 kilograms. Nanjiayu shouted. We have to put it in the water. When Shishi was about to put the brick into the plastic cup, she suddenly remembered something. She lifted her head and said excitedly to her friends, "Pay attention, it's super magical." At this moment, even Lan Xian poked her head over curiously. She carefully put the brick into the plastic cup. Suddenly, many bubbles appeared on the surface of the brick like a curtain of beads, rising to the surface of the water in strings. Of course, the bubbling sound was very soft and almost inaudible. However, it still made the children stare. Wow! This stone can spit out bubbles. It's like a frog. Nanjiayu shouted in amazement. Young Luochi had a different opinion. She let go of Tong Tong's hand and leaned over. She looked at the brick with both hands on the floor and said, "It's not like a frog, it's like a small fish. Only small fish can spit out bubbles like this." "Are there small fish inside?" Nanjiayu asked in surprise. "Hee, it's not bubbles and it's not like there are small fish," Shishi happily explained to her friends. "My papa said that it's because there are many small holes in the brick that we can't see. It will suck in water, and then the air inside will escape. That's why there are small bubbles." "I see." Young Luochi listened to Cece's explanation and looked at this little brick that could spit bubbles with amazement along with the other little friends. Of course, at this time, a small head popped out from beside young Luochi. She turned around and saw Tong Tong, who was about to join in the fun. When Tong Tong saw that he had been discovered, he immediately looked at his sister and grinned. "Oh, Shishi, your little brother is so cute." Young Luochi was amused by Tong Tong. Chapter 992. In fact, Shishi's experiment was not only to show the amazing phenomenon of the brick absorbing water, but also to let the children calculate how much water the brick absorbed. However, this kind of calculation question was not very attractive to Nanjiayu and Lan Xian. After a while, Nanjiayu excitedly urged Shishi to perform more experiments for them. In the evening, Nanjiayu and Yang Luochi were about to go home. Their respective fathers came to pick them up one after another. Yang Luochi was a little late, and Yang Guo only rushed over after class. Yang Luochi reluctantly said goodbye to Shishi and Tong Tong, and prepared to go home with her father. However, just as Yang Luochi's foot stepped out of the villa's door, she shrank back. "Dad, can you wait a minute? I want to borrow a book from Shishi." Yang Luochi remembered the color book that she couldn't forget in the morning. After she finished speaking, she turned around and ran to Shishi. "What book?" Yang Guo was a little puzzled. "Chichi, what book do you want to read? Let's go to the bookstore later. Dad will buy it for you." Yang Yi stood at the side and smiled. You really can't buy this book. Our publishing company is preparing to import it. We just found someone to translate it, and are still in the process of proofreading. Coincidentally, I have an extra sample book here. Take it back for Chi-Chi to read. But I think you'll have to help me explain it. This book is all in English. This was a piece of cake for Yang Gua. He was an associate professor who taught English at a university. On the other side, the two young ladies discussed in whispers for a while. Cece turned her head and ran to the side hall, where she had placed her things earlier. She generously handed the book they had been reading in the morning to Yang Luoqi. Thank you, Shishi. I'll return it to you after I finish reading it. I'll bring it to school for you, okay? Yang Luoqi thought for a while and suggested. Sure. You can read it for a long time. Hee, this book is so fun. Shishi smiled sweetly at her friend. Yang Yi noticed that after Shishi's two friends went home, Lan Xian stayed at their house. She ran downstairs with Shishi and was chased upstairs by Tong Tong. Her heavy little feet made thumping sounds on the stairs. Walk slower. Don't fall down. Yang Yi was preparing to make dinner. He walked to the stairwell and called out to her. He asked, Xianair, are you eating at our house tonight? If you are, I'll cook your dinner. Lan Xian stood on her tiptoes and poked her head out from the top of the stairs. She asked with elation. Really? But I don't have any gold coins. She said Chi-Chi. Chi-Chi, 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 Chi-Chi. But when school starts, you won't be able to do that anymore. You have to study hard and train hard. Lan Xian didn't answer Yang Yi's question directly. However, the little girl's cheers told Yang Yi her answer. Yeah. Uncle Yang is such a good person. Hee Shishi, I can eat at your house. This was an unexpected gain. In fact, Lan Xian didn't want to achieve this goal. She didn't want to go home because it was too boring at home. It wasn't as interesting as Shishi's house. Besides Shishi's interesting words, there was also a playful Tong Tong who often came to join in the fun. Lan Xian and Shishi giggled and chased each other. They ran into Shishi's room, closed the door, and jumped onto the bed together. Tong Tong didn't know what made them laugh so happily. Shishi was laughing so hard that she was leaning forward and backward. She hugged the quilt and rolled into a ball. After playing for a while, Lan Xian suggested excitedly, Shishi, let's go watch TV. This might be her ultimate goal. She couldn't watch TV at home, but she could come to Shishi's house to watch TV. Shishi had said before that she had a lot of gold coins. Then she could watch TV for a long time. Lan Xian remembered that Jiangnan TV station now had children's dramas. After dinner, they could continue to watch TV. At that time, the Central Children's Channel would play cartoons that she and Shishi liked to watch. However, when Shishi heard that she wanted to watch TV, she quickly waved her hand and shook her head. No, Xianair, I can't watch TV now. Why? Lan Xian asked in confusion. Because I have to save it. When I save 100 gold coins, I'll ask my papa to help me deposit it in the bank, Shishi said longingly. Lan Xian was still confused. Deposit it in the bank? Shishi was happy to explain this to her little friend. Xianair, let me tell you, our money can be deposited in the bank. Yesterday, my father and I deposited my New Year's money in the bank. Shishi got up from the bed and went to the bedside cabinet. She took out her treasure chest, opened it, took out the deposit slip, and showed it to Lan Xian. Look, Papa and I have saved 12,000 yuan. Papa said that after 3 years, I will have an extra 990 yuan. Shishi said excitedly. If I save the gold coins, then I can have new gold coins. Ah, that's amazing. Lan Xian asked in surprise. If you have 100 gold coins, how many new gold coins can you have? Shishi counted with her fingers. Last time, her father gave her an example of how much interest she could get from 100 yuan. It seemed to be more than 2 yuan. 2. Shishi thought that the decimal point was too complicated, so she simply gave a rounded answer. 2. Lan Xian's eyes lit up and said excitedly, If I have 100 gold coins, I don't have to exercise, right? I have 2 gold coins. Ha! Shishi tilted her little head and thought. She felt that something was wrong. But Shishi couldn't figure out the key point. Lon Xian seemed to regard annual income as daily income. Well, it should be. She nodded her little head hesitantly. Then I need to save money too. I just need 200 gold coins. Lon Xian seemed to have a sudden increase in IQ. She proudly counted with her fingers and counted for Shi. Then I can have 4 gold coins. Then, I can watch TV and eat at your house. But 200 gold coins is very difficult. Shi pouted her little mouth and said, I'm tired today. I helped Papa pull the grass and only earned 2 gold coins. No, I want to earn 200 gold coins. Lon Xian was full of motivation and shouted excitedly. The little girl felt that if she was willing to invest now, she could lie down and eat in the future. Shi, I can tell your father that in the future, I will help my father pull the grass and do work. Can he ask my mother to give me gold coins? Lon Xian took Shi's hand and asked expectantly. I don't know. Shi always felt that something was wrong, but she couldn't figure it out, so she could only say in a daze, Let's ask your father. Lon Xian didn't want to be lazy at this moment, so she took Shi downstairs in a race against time. Well, let's ask my papa. My papa knows. Shi also frowned and followed behind her little friend. She still felt that something was wrong, but she couldn't figure out what was wrong. Asking her father was the best way. Her father was omnipotent and omniscient. After a while, Yang Yi's cry sounded in the kitchen. My God, who told you that gold coins can be deposited in the bank? Chapter 993. With Yang Yi's cold poke, Shi's plan to save money was thwarted. Lon Xian's dream of gold coins moving forever was finally shattered. The 2 girls were quite regretful. They had thought that the turning point of their lives had come. But after waking up from the dream, they still had to face reality. The new semester had begun, and the 2 girls had to become diligent again. Not only did Lon Xian need to study hard and train hard, but she also needed to retract her distracted mind from playing. Otherwise, her good student card would encounter the first time that she would have no harvest for an entire week. Yang Shi and Lu Xiaoyu, the 2 of you, during class, you can't whisper to each other. Even if you know everything the teacher says, you have to listen carefully in class. Don't affect the other students' studies. On the first day of school in the first class, Shi and Lu Xiaoyu were severely criticized by the teacher in English class. Obviously, the teacher was referring to Shi. After the little girl was criticized by the teacher, her originally excited mood suddenly wilted. Oh no, I forgot that I can't talk in class. If I don't get the good student card today, I'll be criticized by my father when I get home. Actually, Shi didn't deliberately want to violate the class discipline. The little girl was just too excited during the holiday and hadn't settled down on the first day of school. In class, she couldn't help but continue to chat with her desk mate about the topic that they hadn't finished before class. Lu Xiaoyu also went shopping with her mother and bought a hooded sweater skirt. However, after being criticized by the English teacher, Shi and Lu Xiaoyu didn't dare to speak anymore. Their little heads were lowered dejectedly. Lu Xiaoyu was even more worried that she would be beaten up when she got home. The teacher can't see me, the teacher can't see me. Lu Xiaoyu quickly buried her head in the book and prayed in her heart. Lu Xiaoyu could only hope that the English teacher would forget about her mistake after the class. That way the homeroom teacher, Teacher Li, would not know about it, let alone report it to her father. Actually, Li Ruolin had no intention of complaining to her parents about such a trivial matter. Even if her English teacher did forget about it after class, Li Ruolin would only call the 2 girls to her office and lecture them at most. However, Shi and Lu Xiaoyu did not know that their English teacher was so forgetful. This matter was like a shadow that shrouded Shi and Lu Xiaoyu's hearts. The 2 girls couldn't find the mood to talk and play for the whole day. In the afternoon, after the second class, because today was the first day of school, the teachers of each class would host a class meeting, so today's interest classes were suspended. Cici sat in her seat obediently and looked at Teacher Li, who was walking up to the podium nervously. She was still a little uneasy. Will Teacher Li criticize me? However, the main topic of Li Ruolin's class meeting this time was the selection of class committee members. With a warm smile on her face, she first introduced the performance of several acting class committee members in her class in the past semester to her classmates. Last year, we implemented the system of committee members mainly because everyone is new to the school. It's your first time being a member of such a large group, so you don't know what it's like to be a class committee member. Therefore, we adopted the system of committee members to let everyone understand the responsibilities of a class committee member. We also let some students who are interested in becoming class committee members try out these jobs in positions that they are interested in. After a few rotations, some students went to positions that were more suitable for them, some stayed, and some new students bravely took the first step. Here, I would like to praise the following students and thank them for being class committee members for a period of time last year. Their performance was very outstanding, and they have also given me a lot of support and help. Here, Li Ruolin played a little trick. Even though she said that she only wanted to praise a few of the students, in reality, she spoke with fervor and assurance. She spent a long time calling out almost every student who had applied to be a substitute class committee member. Moreover, from time to time, she would glance at her notebook and read out some of the things that they had done that left a deep impression on her. These mental motivations were very effective. For example, Chao Ruolin, who had been acting class monitor twice, but had been isolated by her classmates because she liked to complain. For example, Chen Yuxuan, who had bad grades and loved to play basketball but had been a sports committee member once, and so on. Every child who was called out looked up in anticipation. It was as if they were being illuminated by the dawn. They puffed out their chests and revealed excited smiles on their faces. She was also called out. When school started, she was appointed by Li Ruolin as the acting Cultural and Entertainment Committee member. She had been appointed for 2 months. Later, when someone had applied to try for the position, she had stepped down from the second line. However, this experience didn't seem to give Shishi a particularly great sense of accomplishment, because when she was the Cultural and Entertainment Committee member, the class didn't need to organize any cultural and entertainment activities. All she needed to do was to follow the teacher's instructions during every music class and lead the students to sing. However, Li Ruolin still found a highlight to praise Shishi. After Shishi was called out, she raised her little head in a daze and was still a little nervous. She only heard Teacher Li say from above, "Student Yang, she has also been the acting Cultural and Entertainment Committee member for 2 periods. We all know that student Yang, she won first place in the school's dance competition in December last semester. This has brought a lot of glory to our class. Let's all applaud for her again, okay?" It seemed that the reason for this praise was a little far-fetched. However, Shishi relied on her good popularity in the class, and still received a very warm applause. Shishi was a little flattered and opened her little mouth. Her little face, which was originally a little anxious, now revealed a happy smile. This was a compliment. After Teacher Li praised many students in the class, she finally came to the main topic. From this semester onwards, we will no longer implement the system of acting class committee members, because everyone is already very familiar with it. Therefore, we will use the method of election to elect our class committee for the entire semester. Class monitor, vice class monitor, study committee member, cultural and entertainment committee member. Li Ruolin pointed out every position. Other than the section representatives, which were left to the respective teachers to appoint themselves, these positions needed to be chosen through democratic election. Okay, now let's start the first process, which is to elect the class monitor. Students who are interested in being the class monitor, please stand up bravely, come to this podium, and state why you want to be the class monitor. Later, the students will vote for you according to each candidate's statement and usual performance. The one with the highest number of votes will be the class monitor. Of course, students who are not chosen as the class monitor, don't be discouraged. You can continue to work hard. We still have other positions waiting for you. Li Ruolin said with a smile. Before Teacher Li said to start, there were already several activists looking at the podium eagerly, such as Chao Ruolin. She adjusted her glasses, and her eyes were shining with excitement. However, these activists did not include Shishi, Lan Xian, and Lu Xiaoyu. These little girls were just waiting to watch the show with relish. They did not like being the class monitor. They did not like the class monitor because Chow Ruolin liked to snitch. Chapter 994. As for the homeroom teacher, Li Ruolin, she hoped to see more activists in the class who wanted to be the class monitor. Proper competition could promote the growth of these children. Even if they failed, they would work harder in other positions in the future to get closer to the position they wanted. That's why Li Ruolin praised the kids so hard in the beginning. She hoped that they could feel the honor of being class leaders. She hoped that during the election later, there would be more kids fighting to be the class leader. 10 minutes later, the candidates for the class monitor went on stage one by one to give a speech. The eager expressions of the children made Teacher Li feel gratified. There were still many children who were willing to participate in the election of the class monitor. Needless to say, super activists like Chow Ruolin were one of them. There were also a few children whose eyes were filled with eagerness that Li Ruolin caught. However, when they raised their hands, they hesitated, worried that they would lose face if they failed to compete. Fortunately, Li Ruolin walked down and encouraged them to go to the podium. The last candidate to give a speech on the podium, Wang Lele, was still very nervous. His voice was stuttering as he said, I want to be the class monitor. It's because my dad wants me to be the class monitor. The candidates just now all had their own subjective wishes, but when it came to Wang Lele, it was actually his parents' instructions. His speech made the children below the stage burst into laughter. A few mischievous children, like Chen Yuxuan, winked at his desk mate and posed as if Wang Lele was nervous. Then the two of them beamed with joy and laughed at Wang Lele on stage. Everyone, please be quiet. We want to give Wang Lele a round of applause because he has the courage to stand on this podium. As a teacher, I also hope that you have the courage to stand on stage. Li Ruolin saw that everyone's laughter made Wang Lele even more embarrassed. He was so embarrassed that he wanted to bury his head in his chest. She had no choice but to come out and maintain order. Something's not right. It seems like there's one person missing. Li Ruolin couldn't help but turn her head to look at the seat in the middle. At the back of the classroom, Shishi was sitting obediently in her seat, watching the students' speeches with great interest. Why isn't she running? Li Ruolin couldn't help but frown. In fact, Li Ruolin had hoped that Shishi would participate in the election. This child was very obedient, and her words and actions were more generous. She also had good grades. In Li Ruolin's heart, she was the best candidate for the class monitor. So, after Wang Lele stated his original intention of becoming the class president, Li Ruolin glanced at Shishi again and raised her voice to ask if anyone else wanted to run for the position of class president. However, Shishi was still watching the show calmly. Just like the other children, she was smiling with her eyes curved, as if she was already out of it. On the other hand, the other candidates were anxious, especially Chow Ruolin, who was the first to give a speech. She looked at the teacher on the stage anxiously for a while, and then looked around at the students in the class. She seemed to be worried that more people would come to compete with her. Fortunately, Shishi was still unmoved by the teacher's words. She didn't even know if the teacher's words were directed at her, or if she was just sitting in her seat and watching curiously. Li Ruolin was at her wit's end. She wrote down the names of the children who had just gone on stage on the blackboard. Then, she asked each child to take out a blank piece of paper and write down the name of their favorite class monitor. I'll have to trouble the students sitting at the back of each group to help me collect the votes. In the end, she didn't force her will on Shishi. Li Ruolin still wanted this class committee election to be as democratic as possible. It was time to vote. Shishi carefully tore out a blank piece of paper from her draft book. Shishi, can you give me one? Lu Xiaoyu, who was next to Shishi, flipped through her draft book for a long time but couldn't find a blank piece of paper. I don't have any left. I'll go home and get it. Then I'll return it to you. Shishi generously handed the piece of paper she had just torn out to Lu Xiaoyu. She giggled and said, "You don't have to return it." This conversation of borrowing stationery wasn't considered whispering in class. After all, it was impossible to not say a word for the entire class. It was fine as long as they didn't whisper anything unrelated to the class. Shishi tore out another piece of paper. At this time, She began to think about which student to choose as the new class monitor. There were so many students who went on stage to give a speech, but only a few left a deep impression on Xixi. Among them were the serious Chao Ruolin and the serious Wang Lele. Xixi didn't want to choose Chao Ruolin. In the end, her attention fell on Wang Lele's name. Wang Lele. Wang Lele. Okay. Xixi preferred to follow the guidance of her heart. Now only Wang Lele's name was left in her mind. Although she didn't think about why she chose Wang Lele, since she already knew it was him in her mind, the little girl still carefully wrote down Wang Lele's name stroke by stroke on her paper. When it came to the counting of votes, Xixi watched with great interest as a classmate counted the votes while teacher Li Ruolin marked the names of each candidate. Chao Ruolin, Du Yuqian, Jiang Chun. The results of the counting were a bit surprising. There were so many candidates, but they all received relatively average votes. There was no one who was particularly outstanding, but there was one who received very little votes. The rather miserable Wang Lele only received 2 votes. It was unknown if the other vote was for himself. Except for Wang Lele, the votes of the other candidates were relatively average. They all received around 5, 6, or 7 votes. Chao Ruolin received 9 votes. Compared to the total number of people in the class, the number of votes she received was definitely not a lot. But compared to the other candidates, Chao Ruolin actually won. This result was unexpected by many students. Chao Ruolin was indeed not very popular in the class. However, this was also because there were too many candidates who had split their votes evenly. Which of those candidates did not have a few good friends? But when the votes were divided, Chao Ruolin became the big winner. If there were only 2 candidates, Chao Ruolin's votes would probably still be the same. As for the remaining votes, they could completely crush her. But it was useless to say this now. According to the rules, the one with the highest number of votes was the class leader. Chao Ruolin was pleasantly surprised. She pushed up her glasses and looked at the final results on the blackboard in disbelief. When she saw that she received so few votes, she thought she was done for. She didn't expect to win. Let us congratulate Chao Ruolin for becoming our class leader for this semester. I hope you can continue to work hard in the coming semester, Li Ruolin announced with a smile. Her view of Chao Ruolin was not as extreme as the other children. She felt that Chao Ruolin was very cooperative with the teacher. It was easy to offend people as the class leader. Wasn't this normal? You chose Wang Lele. On the car back, Xixi and Lan Xian chatted in the back about the interesting and fresh class leader election. Lan Xian shouted, I chose Du Yuqian. She is my desk mate. Why didn't you choose Du Yuqian? Now Chao Ruolin is the class leader. I don't know. But I think it's very interesting that Wang Lele said that his papa wants him to be the class leader. Xixi giggled. So you choose whoever you think is interesting? Yang Yi smiled and added. Yes, papa. Isn't it like this? Xixi asked in confusion. Looking at her carefree appearance, it seemed that she really didn't care about the class leader election. It's okay, papa is just saying. Yang Yi smiled. You are the one who voted. You have the right to vote for anyone. Lan Xian ignored this boring class leader. At this moment she proudly said, But Xixi, let me tell you, I voted for you, and then I also asked my desk mate to vote for you. Didn't you say that Xixi didn't run to be the class leader? Yang Yi listened to their interesting conversation and couldn't help but ask. No, Xixi didn't go to be the class leader. She went to be the literature and art committee member. Lan Xian rushed to answer. Xixi reached out to hug her father's chair, stretched out her small head, and explained to her father in a somewhat raised voice. Teacher Li said that I can dance and sing, so I can be the literature and art committee member. Then how many votes did you get? Yang Yi asked curiously. I got 57 votes. Xixi happily said, Papa, many students voted for me. After all, Xixi was popular. Lan Xian pulled Xixi and couldn't wait to take credit. Xixi, I voted for you the most. Where did the most come from? Didn't everyone have one vote? This Lan Xian. But Xixi was in high spirits and didn't think too much. She sweetly pulled Lan Xian and smiled. Thank you Xin air. Then who ran for literature and art committee member with you? Yang Yi heard that his daughter got 57 votes, which meant that most of the students in the class voted for Xixi, while her opponent only had a few votes. Yang Yi was very curious, who was so tragic? Wang Lele, Lan Xian and Xixi responded one after another. Chapter 995. In the end, Xixi was elected as the literature committee member of the first grade's class 3. As for Wang Lele, who had actively participated in various elections but was rather pathetic, Li Ruolin couldn't bear to see him become the team leader of their group. What did a group leader do? There didn't seem to be anything special. They just helped the subject representatives collect and hand out homework. The 4 group leaders didn't even need to be elected. Other than one student who actively wanted to be a group leader, the other 2 had to be invited by Li Ruolin before they reluctantly agreed to be group leaders. Wang Lele was also directly invited by Li Ruolin, but he was still quite satisfied with the title of group leader. Group leader, it's only one word different from class leader. When I go back and report to my parents, it'll definitely be better than being a literature and arts committee member. Let's not talk about little Wang. Xixi, who was once again a literature and arts committee member, didn't feel any difference between her studies and last semester. During class, she still chatted with Lu Xiaoyu and played with Lan Xian between classes. She wasn't at all like Chao Ruolin and the other vice class leaders. They all acted like officials and went to the teacher's office every time they had free time. They were even more attentive than the subject representatives who went to get homework. Of course, Xixi wasn't interested in power struggles. In comparison, she was more willing to use the precious time between classes to tell her friends about the interesting experiences she had at her grandfather's house during the winter break. However, on Tuesday during the 3rd period of class, Yu Xiaowei, who they hadn't seen for the entire break, came to find them. This was the first time Yu Xiaowei came to the lower grades building. She held a small bag in her hand and pursed her lips as she stood outside the door of the first grade's class. She had a nervous and expectant expression on her face. Isn't that Sister Xiaowei? Lu Xiaoyu was the first to discover her. She happily told Xixi about her discovery. Wow, Sister Xiaowei. Xixi turned her head and excitedly called out. She immediately moved her chair and excitedly went out with Lu Xiaoyu to welcome her. Yu Xiaowei came to give them gifts. When she saw Xixi and the others come out, she also smiled, revealing her white teeth. Yu Xiaowei, who used to be so introverted that she wouldn't even smile in school, had improved a lot now. Not only did she know how to talk to others, but she also often smiled when she was happy. Xixi, little Yu, I went to Yangcheng with my mother during the holidays. After that, we went shopping. I saw that these Terra dolls were especially beautiful, so I bought them. Yu Xiaowei said seriously. Both of you have one, and so does Xian Air. Xiaowei opened the bag and took out 3 boxes. She handed 2 of them to Xixi and Lu Xiaoyu. Wow, this is a gift from Sister Xiaowei. Xixi did not know what the Terra Bozu was, but she was very happy to receive the gift. She held the small box in her hands and said happily. Xian Air went to the washroom. Lu Xiaoyu said. Xixi remembered that Yu Xiaowei had mentioned the keyword Yangcheng. She didn't even bother to open the box to see what was inside as she impatiently asked Yu Xiaowei. Sister Xiaowei, are you going to Yangcheng with your mama to play? Yes. My mother and my grandmother. Yu Xiaowei said. I've also been to Yangcheng. Also Sister Xiaowei, my father, mom, and little brother, the 4 of us even went to Harbor City. Harbor City is very close to Yangcheng, but it's really fun. We went to the amusement park to play. It's super fun. We even rode on the Ferris wheel. Xixi was very excited and told a bunch of stories about herself. Even Lu Xiaoyu could only listen to Xixi's rapid speech in amazement, let alone Yu Xiaowei, who was slow and sluggish. Luckily, Lan Xian came back and saved Yu Xiaowei. She could continue to explain her small gift to Xixi and the others. These are the Terra babies. My mother said we can also call them Qingnyang. Yu Xiaowei saw Lan Xian take out 2 matching blue and red Terra babies from the box and said softly. She said if we hang them up when it's raining, it won't rain anymore. So they're called Terra babies. They're so cute. Xixi and Lu Xiaoyu forgot to open their own boxes. Instead, they saw Lan Xian take them out and were attracted by the two ceramic pendants in Lan Xian's hands. The two girls excitedly went over and looked at them with their heads lowered. I like them a lot. Lan Xian touched them lovingly for a while and finally nodded in approval. Thank you, Sister Xiaowei. Xixi, little you have one too. Yu Xiaowei reminded them. When she saw that Xixi and the others liked them, the slight nervousness on her face dissipated and was replaced by a happy smile. What could make one happier than the satisfaction of having carefully prepared a gift for one's friends and receiving their approval and liking? Oh, that's right. Only then did Xixi and Lu Xiaoyu remember that they had forgotten about the boxes in their hands while chatting. They giggled. Outside the classroom of the first grade, Class 3, the warm spring sun shone through the branches and flowed into the bright corridor. It also sprinkled on the cute little faces. When class was about to start, Xixi hurried back into the classroom. She only cared about stuffing the box in her hand into the drawer, and quickly picked up her textbook to listen to the teacher. This class was obviously a bit torturous, and it had nothing to do with the teacher or the content of the class. Xixi was eagerly looking forward to the end of the class, so that she could continue to play with the white, chubby, and cute porcelain dolls. When class finally ended, Xixi took out the two Terra dolls from the drawer. As they had a porcelain texture, just like the vases at home, the little girl was a little worried that they would break, so she picked them up very carefully. Xixi, where are you going to put them? Lu Xiaoyu did not have such concerns. She excitedly grabbed the dolls in her hands and started discussing with Xixi. I heard from Sister Xiaowei that she's already hung them on her bag. I want to hang them on my bag too. They'll look good that way. No, you can't hang them on your bag. They'll break. Xixi shook her head reluctantly and said, I want to hang them at home, but I have to ask my daddy where to hang them. I don't want to hang them at home. I think they'll look better on my bag. These Terra dolls are very hard. How can they break? I see other people hanging things on their bags too. Lu Xiaoyu insisted on her opinion. They'll break. Xixi whispered worriedly. She was actually not very confident in her own judgment. However, she preferred to take the safer route. Therefore, even though she was refuting her friend, she was not confident enough. Little you. Why don't you hang them on your bag, and I'll hang them at home? Sure. I like to hang them on my bag. That way I can see them often. Lu Xiaoyu happily turned around and took her bag from behind the chair. She started gesturing left and right to see where it would look the best. She muttered generously, Xixi, it's okay. You can hang them at home. You can look at mine when you're free. Xixi also enthusiastically helped her friend find the best spot. How about here? There's a button here. Also, I think they'll look good on you when you're carrying your bag. After confirming the best spot, Xixi put her Terra dolls back and reached out to help the clumsy Lu Xiaoyu hook them up. Let me help you. The two girls fiddled around in their seats and chattered nonstop. Finally, they succeeded in attracting other people's attention. Chen Yuxuan, who was sitting behind Xixi, could not help but lean over and ask, What are you two doing? What's this? It looks pretty good. We can't show it to you. Xixi hurriedly covered it up. Yes, we can't show it to you. Lu Xiaoyu hugged Xixi and used her body to block Chen Yuxuan's view. Who asked Chen Yuxuan to be such a troublemaker in class? Moreover, he had a record of peeking at Xixi's test papers. Xixi and Lu Xiaoyu were both wary of him. If you don't want to show it to me, then so be it. Chen Yuxuan resentfully sat back down. What can I do? I can't bully two girls, right? Chao Ruolin is eyeing me like a tiger watching its prey. If I dare to bully my classmates, as the new class president, I'll definitely get my revenge. Of course, she said it as if I can bully Xixi and Lu Xiaoyu. Not to mention that Xixi is taller than me, stronger than me, and knows swordsmanship. Lu Xiaoyu's father is a police officer. He once saw Lu Xiaoyu's father driving a police car at the school gate after school. These two girls are not easy to deal with. Sob, sob, sob. I better not provoke them. Chapter 996. In February, the second season of The Limit Challenge, which was scheduled to be broadcast on weekends during prime time, began its joyous journey once again. Although the premiere wasn't as amazing as the previous year, and it didn't set a new record, its ratings were still able to rank at the top of the variety shows in the same season. It even reached the top during the second episode. This meant that The Limit Challenge already had a group of very loyal fans. As long as the main 6 members didn't change, and the show didn't have any major problems, its ratings were basically guaranteed. However, in Jiangcheng, the preparation for the new variety show that Jiangnan TV station and China Star Productions had put in a lot of effort to create was basically completed. The program team led by Hong Yumin was nervously and orderly preparing for its first recording. This was probably a big opponent that The Limit Challenge would have to face in the future. Although they were of different genres and were the works of the same boss, at the same time period, in terms of ratings and public opinion, the two shows were bound to have a battle. Today, Yang Yi and Murphy also came to Jiangnan TV station. They were prepared to visit and experience the recording hall that Jiangnan TV station had specially built for their show with a lot of money. Yang Yi didn't expect Jiangnan TV station to be so rich and generous. There was never a lack of reporters waiting outside Jiangnan TV station. Yang Yi's car slowly drove into the courtyard and stopped in the parking lot. When he and Murphy got out of the car, they heard the sound of camera clicking behind them. Yang Yi subconsciously turned his head to look. A few paparazzi were excitedly standing outside the fence holding their cameras and frantically pressing the shutters. Yang Yi was used to this kind of scene by now. His eyes just swept past them, but his expression didn't change at all. Then, Yang Yi locked the car and reached out to gently hug Murphy, who was carrying Tong Tong. The two of them calmly walked in the direction of the TV station building. Hong Yumin came out to greet them. Coincidentally, Yang Yi and the others also met Jiangnan TV station's director, Wu Xiangdong, and his assistant, Qin Yu downstairs. Wu Xiangdong smiled when he saw Yang Yi. However, he still had a meeting to host later, so he got Qin Yu to entertain Yang Yi. There was no need to elaborate on the pleasantries. The main purpose of Yang Yi and his team was to visit and check out the new recording hall of I Am a Singer. Soon, they arrived at the recording hall. As soon as they entered, the door was closed, and any movement from the outside world seemed to have been isolated. The perfect soundproofing effect made Yang Yi and Mo Fei, with their picky ears, could only hear the buzzing of the staff talking at the scene. The recording hall was about 1,200 square meters. It wasn't big, but it could support a small stage. The circular stage was like a heavenly altar, surrounded by several rings of stairs. It gave people a sense of competition like the PK stage in the middle of the Colosseum. The decoration of the stage was very luxurious. The bright black tiles were made of a special material. It was a kind of decoration that reflected light, but didn't reflect too much light like a mirror. When different colors of light hit it, there would be a certain degree of enhancement effect. Behind the stage, there were all kinds of spotlights and colored lights. However, the most eye-catching ones were the rows of line array speakers. They were like the sails of a sailboat, hanging down in rows. This is all thanks to Jiangnan TV station's support. Our equipment is very good. For example, the sound system. The main loudspeaker is LACOUSDICSKUDOVDOSC, and the stage return is LACOUSDICSHIQ15. Hong Yumin excitedly introduced to Yang Yi. A long list of complicated brands and models could be blurted out. Note: this is some information borrowed from the real-life version of I Am a Singer. Yang Yi and Murphy weren't outsiders. Although they couldn't be considered experts in sound equipment, they still knew what kind of position such equipment occupied in the industry. I don't think even Eason's concert could be made on such a large scale. Director Hong, can I try singing later? Murphy's eyes were filled with excitement as she asked Hong Yumin with a smile. That's not a problem. We finished all the wiring yesterday. Today's main task is debugging. You can also help us try out the sound effects. Hong Yumin said with a smile. The equipment in the venue was very luxurious. Other than the sound system, there was also the Ferrari DJI Co SD5 and SD7 of sound mixers. There were also the best microphones and wireless systems. Of course, with such good equipment, it still required a top team to support it. However, there was no need to worry about that. After the first season of China's Voice, as well as the continuous recruitment of the industry's top tuners, sound collectors, and music producers, the professional team that China Star Productions assigned to Hong Yuman could be said to be a luxurious lineup. Qin Yu was indeed the assistant to the director. He knew how to behave. He knew that he wasn't a professional, so when Hong Yuman introduced the equipment to Yang Yi, he tactfully stood at the side and listened with a smile. It wasn't clear if he understood, but he smiled and nodded from time to time, as if he understood. In the end, it's still our hometown's TV station that supports us the most. They bought such expensive equipment just like that. Hong Yuman complimented Jiangnan TV station at the right time. This was the time for Qin Yu to speak. He smiled and waved his hand, saying, "Not at all. Teacher Yang and Teacher Hong, your reputation is out there. It's our luck that our TV station is able to work with you." Qin Yu covered his mouth with his hand and purposely whispered a few words. "I won't hide it from Teacher Yang. Our Wu Tai station has put in a lot of effort. After all, Teacher Yang and Mayor Gua have a good relationship. For this program, we have to do our best to cooperate with you. Therefore, we have to provide you with the best resources." Following that, he laughed heartily and returned to his normal voice. He said with a smile, "Of course, the television station has also made an assessment. They feel that with China's The Voice's popularity in the music variety show market, our show's format is novel and has a better effect in terms of attracting celebrities. It can definitely be made into one of our station's signature shows, so it's normal for them to give us more support." Yang Yi felt quite uncomfortable listening to these bureaucratic words. Although Qin Yu was also flattering him, there was probably a lot of hypocrisy in it. Luckily, Qin Yu quickly shut his mouth and pretended to be invisible at the side. He did not disturb Yang Yi and Murphy's audition. During the audition process of Murphy singing a song, Hong Yuman arranged for someone to record it with the camera and sound equipment. These would be used as highlights for the promotion of I Am a Singer in the future. The effect is very good. After Murphy finished singing, Yang Yi smiled and applauded. He commented, "I'm listening from below. This feeling is very strange. It's as if every turn of your voice is coming out from beside my ear. It's better than listening to non-destructive music with top-notch headphones. Moreover, the sound pressure created by the live broadcast is exactly the same as a concert. It's a great feeling to listen to it live. Come and sing a part too. Let me give it a try." Murphy pulled Tong Tong to her side and urged Yang Yi. She also wanted to experience the ultimate enjoyment of music brought by this level of sound equipment live. The two of them played with the sound equipment, as if there was no one else around. After listening to Yang Yi's live broadcast, Murphy couldn't help but give him a thumbs up. She sighed and said, "A good sound system is indeed different." She glanced at Hong Yuman and Qin Yu beside her. She pulled Yang Yi and secretly asked, "Do you think we can borrow this place? I suddenly feel that this place is very suitable for holding a fan handshake meeting. We can occasionally hold small events like this. It doesn't have to be a big concert. It's also a good way to give back to the fans who have always supported us." Murphy was a little uncertain. This was because the venue and equipment belonged to Jiangnan TV station. If they wanted to borrow it, they would have to ask for Guizi's father's favor. Yang Yi smiled and said, "Why would we want to borrow from others? If you like it, we can buy a piece of land near the company and build a small theater. We can just build our own venue according to this scale." Yang Yi could still afford to squander this amount of money. Chapter 997. With the arrival of a new week, Shi, the Literature and Art Committee member, finally felt her presence. On Monday afternoon, when the second class was about to end, Shi was already ready to pack her bag. She was going to the interest class of kicking shuttlecock later. Don't think that kicking shuttlecock was not a serious sport. There were still many girls who signed up for this interest class. Moreover, Shi was lively and active. She was still very good at this sport that required her to jump around. But at this time, Teacher Li Ruolin, who was standing on the podium, closed the textbook and read out a small school competition to them. "In order to beautify our campus, class, and enrich our classroom life. Every class needs to actively design and complete the blackboard at the back of the classroom. The layout is required to be beautiful, the writing is standard and neat, and the content is positive. Simply put, it has to be done well. When the time comes, our class's blackboard will also be based on the class. Participate in this blackboard evaluation competition. The top 3 of each grade will be selected, and the school will award the winning class with a certificate. Li Ruolin pointed to the big blackboard at the back of the classroom. Next to it was only a certificate from last year's honor garden. She encouraged, "Students, this is a good opportunity for us to fight for our collective honor. I hope that students with talent in writing and drawing will participate actively and help our organization's publicity committee members to do a good job on our blackboard." Li Ruolin looked at the publicity committee member, Du Yuqian, who was looking at her at a loss. She pondered for a moment and said, "How about this? In our class, this work will be handed over to the publicity committee member, Du Yuqian, and the literature and art committee member, Yang Shi. You will be responsible for organizing and completing our class's blackboard. Do you understand what the teacher means, Du Yuqian, Yang Shi?" Shi sat below the stage. She was already a little absent-minded. She was looking forward to going to the shuttlecock class as soon as possible. At this moment, when she heard her name being mentioned by the teacher, she regained her senses. Of course, she was also listening just now. Now she still understood what she was going to do. However, the little girl was a little dumbfounded. "Ah, me too." Such a sentence appeared in Shishi's mind. However, when the teacher mentioned her and Du Yuqian's names again, the 2 girls could only nod in confusion. "Okay, thank you for your hard work, Du Yuqian and Yang Shi. Today's class ends here. Everyone, pack up your textbooks and homework and go to your interest class." Li Ruolin smiled and concluded. After class, Li Ruolin was surrounded by a few students who still had questions about the lesson. She tidied up her computer and explained to these students. Then she explained to these students who loved to study and walk to the office. The other students also packed their school bags noisily and ran out of the classroom, shouting excitedly. To them, there was a lot of fun to be had if they went to an interest course. Why would they care about the blackboard competition that the teacher mentioned? Only Shishi and Du Yuqian, the 2 little girls who carried heavy responsibilities on their backs, looked at each other. Du Yuqian threw down her school bag in a daze and scratched her head as she walked to Shishi's seat. "Shishi, do you know how to do this blackboard bulletin?" Du Yuqian pointed at the big blackboard behind Shishi and asked in confusion. Du Yuqian had a good relationship with Shishi in class. Although she couldn't compare to Lan Xian and Lu Xiaoyu, and she didn't often play with Shishi, because she was usually quite cheerful, she would occasionally play with Shishi. That was why she also called Shishi by her nickname. "I don't know either." Shishi shook her little head. "Then what should we do?" Du Yuqian was at a loss. "The teacher asked the 2 of us to do it." It seemed that Du Yuqian had a misunderstanding. Li Ruolin wanted her and Shishi, the 2 class committee members, to take the lead and organize the class's blackboard bulletin. She thought that only she and Shishi would do this work. When Shishi saw Du Yuqian's embarrassed look, she was also at a loss and confused. However, at this moment, the little girl smiled enthusiastically and said with a very positive expression, "Yuqian, don't be afraid. I can ask my papa how to do this blackboard bulletin. Then, little fishy can also help us, right? Little you." Cece turned to look at Lu Xiaoyu, who was packing her school bag, and asked. Lu Xiaoyu said, and raised her head in confusion. When she understood Shishi's meaning, she nodded and said, "Of course I will help you. I can also ask Xian Air to help. Then we will have 4 people." Shishi counted with her fingers. "Shishi, you can also draw. You draw very well. Didn't the teacher say that you can draw?" Lu Xiaoyu giggled and said, "Yes. Wait a minute, but I don't know how to draw with chalk," Shishi said with some embarrassment. "Hey, it's all the same. It's all about drawing. You can try, you should be able to do it." Lu Xiaoyu pretended to know and egged her on. "Okay then." Shishi nodded. Listening to their lively conversation, Du Yuqian seemed to have found her backbone. She nodded happily and said, That's great, Shishi, you are so awesome. I will listen to you. It seemed that such an activity should be in charge of the publicity committee. However, Du Yuqian was not elected as a publicity committee member because of her ability to organize publicity. Her situation was similar to Wang Leilei's. She was also encouraged by her parents to run for the class monitor. Of course, she also failed. She was only slightly better than Wang Leilei. Du Yuqian later mustered up the courage to run for the publicity committee member for the second time, and unexpectedly succeeded. If it were not for her success this time, she would not have the courage to try a third time. Now that she had encountered such a big problem, Du Yuqian did not think about fighting for power. Instead, the little girl's thoughts were very simple. She was happy to have someone to rely on. When they got home in the evening, Shishi told her father about the blackboard bulletin. However, Shishi overestimated her father. Yang Yi had lived 2 lives and had never made a blackboard bulletin before. Therefore, he could be said to be a layman. However, for Yang Yi, even if he had never done it before, he could guess how it should be done. Wasn't it the same as the layout of a newspaper? It also required a good idea of the space layout, content arrangement, and so on. As long as the principle was clear, everything was very simple. However, Yang Yi did not intend to help Shishi design the blackboard bulletin. He felt that this was a good opportunity for Shishi to practice. Therefore, Yang Yi smiled and said to Shishi, "If you don't know how to make a blackboard bulletin, you can refer to the blackboard bulletins made by the seniors. There must be a blackboard bulletin at the back of their classroom. You can go and see how others do it and how they design it. Then, in addition to looking for Xiaoyu and Xi in air, you can also ask other classmates for help." Yang Yi said, "For example, if you need to write on the blackboard, you can ask classmates who can write well to help. If you need some good articles or poems, you can also arrange for classmates to choose. Distribute the work, and everyone has a small part that they are responsible for. Then wouldn't the blackboard bulletin be easy to complete?" Her father's words gave Shishi a lot of inspiration. Chapter 998. My papa said that we can go and see how other people make blackboard announcements. On Tuesday morning, after the first class, Shishi excitedly gathered her friends and Du Yuqian together. Like a round table meeting, they gathered together and started to discuss. "Okay." Du Yuqian didn't even think about it. She giggled and said, "Who are we going to see?" Lan Xian didn't follow the crowd's lead and asked, "We can go and see Sister Xiaowei's class. Do you remember that the last time we went to look for Sister Xiaowei, there was a blackboard announcement at the back of her class?" Shishi said with a clear train of thought. Yes, I remember now. Yes, we can look for Sister Xiaowei." Lu Xiaoyu nodded. These young ladies chattered about the blackboard bulletin, and their enthusiasm attracted the attention of some young boys who liked to join in the fun. Chen Yuxuan propped himself up on the desk and leaned over to listen curiously. However, he didn't want to work. As soon as he heard the girls talking about how to make the blackboard announcement, Chen Yuxuan immediately retracted his head, as if he was worried that Shishi and the others would drag him to work. However, why would the girls pay attention to him? During the break between classes, Cici led her 3 teammates and stormed toward the 3rd grade class 6, which was Yu Xiaowei's class. "You want to see the blackboard announcement?" After listening to Shishi's explanation, Yu Xiaowei led Shishi and the others to the window at the back. The 5 of them stood in a row and leaned against the window to look inside. The 3rd grade children's blackboard announcements were quite good. After all, they had 2 years of experience. The blackboard announcements that were made last semester still looked brand new. The lines of text were separated by colored frames and patterns. This way, space could be used more rationally, and the layout was more orderly and beautiful. The big title was also very beautiful. It was probably drawn with chalk, and every stroke reflected a very clear 3-dimensional feeling. The corners of the text box were also interspersed with small pictures, giving off a cute and refreshing feeling. Of course, it also made the overall impression not feel dull because of too many words. So this is what the blackboard announcement looks like. Du Yuqian stared at it and sighed softly. "Sister Xiaowei, did your class's blackboard announcement win an award?" She asked curiously. No award. Yu Xiaowei was a little embarrassed to say it in front of her class. She looked around and whispered, I saw the blackboard announcements of the 3 classes that won awards. They were very beautiful. They drew very big pictures and a lot of interesting things. It's amazing. It's okay, she can draw too. Lan Xian pointed at she and said proudly. I don't know, because it needs to be drawn with chalk, and I haven't drawn with chalk before. She hesitated for a moment, but soon said energetically, But I can try. Sister Xiaowei, if I draw well, can I win an award? Yu Xiaowei thought for a moment, shook her head, and said, The blackboard announcement has to be written well. Yes, our teacher said that our handwriting isn't very good. It has to be written with beautiful chalk. The few girls fell into deep thought. The break between classes passed quickly. Not long after, the 4 first-year girls finished looking at Yu Xiaowei's class's blackboard announcement and had to go back. However, after saying goodbye to Yu Xiaowei and preparing to go downstairs together, Du Yuqian said to Xixi enviously, Xixi, you're really amazing. You even know the senior sister Xiaowei. She knows a lot. Of course Sister Xiaowei knows a lot. It's because they've done a lot of blackboard announcements. Lan Xian shouted indifferently. However, their words gave Xixi an idea. Her eyes lit up, and she turned around, ran back, and pulled Yu Xiaowei's hand, who was still watching them leave. Sister Xiaowei, can you help us? Xixi was a little excited. She took Yu Xiaowei's hand and twisted her body, as if she was asking for it coquettishly. She said, Everyone says that you know a lot. Can you help us see how to do the blackboard? This was equivalent to hiring a designer. Yu Xiaowei was stunned for a moment and asked nervously, Can I really? But I haven't done it before. I've only seen some blackboard announcements. It's okay, you know a lot more than us. Xixi thought very clearly and she eagerly said, Okay? Sister Xiaowei, can you help me, okay? Although Yu Xiaowei didn't have much of a presence in their class, and the class committee didn't ask for her opinion when they discussed making the blackboard announcement, Yu Xiaowei still wanted to participate in some activities. Therefore, when Yu Xiaowei heard Xixi's invitation, she was pleasantly surprised. Now, Xixi's sincere invitation made Yu Xiaowei even more happy. She pursed her lips, and with a smile in the corner of her eyes she said, Okay, I want to give it a try too. After saying goodbye to Yu Xiaowei, the girls ran down the stairs and hurried back to their classroom. Du Yuqian was a little excited. She ran to Xixi's side, and said with a little uneven breath, Xixi, that's great. Okay, with Sister Xiaowei's help, we can definitely do this blackboard announcement well. Xixi giggled and said, That won't do. Didn't Sister Xiaowei say that we have to write it well? But we don't know how to do it. Right, then what should we do? Du Yuqian was at her wit's end, and could only look at Xixi helplessly. I have a way, Xixi said with certainty. Let me tell you, I have a good friend. His handwriting is super good. My papa said that his papa is a calligrapher. Unfortunately, the class was about to start, and the teacher was about to enter the classroom. Xixi didn't have time to talk to Du Yuqian in detail, and the girls quickly returned to their seats. After school in the morning, Xixi's blackboard announcement team had a new member. Yuqian, this is Nan Zhaoyu. In the cafeteria, Xixi found Du Yuqian, who was eating, and introduced him to her. Nan Zhaoyu is also super good. He can write very beautiful words, and then he can recite poems. He has read a lot of books. Du Yuqian blinked. She was still eating, and her eyes were fixed on Nan Zhaoyu. This made Nan Zhaoyu a little embarrassed, and the young boy's face turned red. Du Yuqian asked curiously, Is Nan Zhaoyu also a senior brother? No. Xixi saw that Du Yuqian misunderstood and quickly explained, He is in the 9th class, the same grade as us. Lan Xian and Lu Xiaoyu grabbed each other's hands and laughed. Du Yuqian called Nan Zhaoyu brother. Then will Nan Zhaoyu also help us make the blackboard announcement? Du Yuqian asked worriedly. She felt that they were in the same grade, so why would this boy help their class make the blackboard announcement? Yes. Xixi felt that it was natural, and she took credit. Nan Zhaoyu was invited by me. I will help. Nan Zhaoyu saw Du Yuqian's doubt, and couldn't help but say, Because Xixi and I are best friends. Du Yuqian chuckled and said, "Okay. That's great. We have so many people to make the blackboard announcement." Du Yuqian saw that there were so many people to help, and her confidence also rose. They could definitely do a good job on the blackboard announcement, and maybe they could even win an award and be praised by the teacher and mother. It was all because she had a good friend, Shishi. This network was too powerful. Chapter 999. Li Ruolin did not think of casually throwing a big task to these 6- or 7-year-old children to complete on their own. In fact, she was still prepared to follow and guide them at any time, teaching Du Yuqian and Shishi how to arrange and design this blackboard bulletin. However, these 2 days, she was also a little busy. It was mainly because of Chen Yuxuan and a few students in the class whose grades were not very good. Li Ruolin was actively contacting their parents. Moreover, she usually communicated with them more and urged them to study. After being busy with all kinds of chores, Li Ruolin somewhat forgot about the blackboard bulletin. It was not until the teachers of other classes in the office talked about what kind of theme their classmates were planning to create on the blackboard bulletin that Li Ruolin suddenly remembered that she had forgotten to care about the situation of their class's blackboard bulletin. Moreover, Li Ruolin was also curious. Why didn't Du Yuqian and Shishi come to her for help? These 2 girls were usually diligent and inquisitive. They were not introverted students. Could it be that they had forgotten? Therefore, on Wednesday afternoon, Shishi carried her small school bag and held her small dancing shoes in her hand. She ran to the teacher's office and looked for teacher Li Ruolin to clock in. Li Ruolin signed her name and asked with a smile, "Young Shi, do you still remember the blackboard bulletin that the teacher told you about on Monday afternoon before school? The teacher asked you and Du Yuqian to be in charge of this matter." Shishi did not understand why the teacher would ask this. The little girl blinked her eyes in confusion and replied in a clear voice, "I remember." "Remember? All right." Li Ruolin decided to change the way she asked. "Now, how are your preparations? Do you need the teacher's help?" Shishi had too much to say about the teacher's question, especially in the first half. One had to know that she and Du Yuqian had spent a lot of time between classes these 2 days running around and being extremely busy. Shishi's eyes lit up. She took a step forward and unconsciously raised her right hand to grab the teacher's table. She said eagerly, "Teacher, let me tell you. We have a lot of people now. Me Yuqian, and Little Fishy, Lu Xiaoyu and Lan Xian." Shishi was used to calling Lu Xiaoyu and Lan Xian by their nicknames, but when she remembered that she was talking to the teacher, she changed it back. Li Ruolin looked at Cici in surprise. She didn't expect that Cici and Du Yuqian, the 2 girls, would be able to find so many people to help them without her guidance. "Wait, this Yu Xiaowei and Nan Jiaoyu are not from our class?" After all, Li Ruolin was still a competent class teacher. She quickly heard the problem and asked in confusion. "That's right, Sister Yu Xiaowei, Sister Yu, and Yu's mother Nan Jiaoyu is in our grade, but he's in the 9th class. They're all my good friends and are willing to help me." Shishi smiled sweetly. Li Ruolin looked at Shishi speechlessly. She just thought that Shishi and Du Yuqian were quite troublesome, but she did not expect them to be so troublesome. They actually got students from other classes to help, and there were even older sisters. In fact, Li Ruolin wanted to tell Shishi, "For our class's blackboard bulletin, try to use our own classmates as much as possible." However, when Li Ruolin saw that Shishi was still excitedly introducing the abilities of each member of her team, she quickly thought, "I can't dampen the enthusiasm of the children." "Ahem, Shishi, since you can find so many helpers, it's also your ability." Li Ruolin thought for a moment, then smiled and said, "Then can you tell me how it's going? When are you going to start drawing the blackboard bulletin on the blackboard?" "Yes, me Yuqian and Lan Xian." Shishi listed a long list of names again, then patiently told the teacher about the details of their preparation today. "We went to look at a lot of 3rd grade's blackboard bulletins, and then we're going to design it together tomorrow. Sister Xiaowei will teach us." Li Ruolin looked at Shishi's beaming face and suddenly felt a sense of defeat. How did she teach such amazing children? They were only in the 1st grade, but they already had such organizational and planning skills? Now that they had started to get on the right track, she, as the form teacher, was late. Moreover, Li Ruolin had a humble question in her mind. What's the use of having you as the form teacher? No matter what, Li Ruolin still encouraged Xixi and let her and her friends continue to work hard. Li Ruolin was a little curious and wanted to see what these outstanding children could do. During dinner in the evening, Xixi also talked to her father about the Blackboard Bulletin. In the past few days, the Blackboard Bulletin had been a hot topic in their family. However, at this moment, the little girl was not as confident as she was in school. Papa, what do you think we should draw on the blackboard? Xixi held the chopsticks as if she was holding a paintbrush. Her elbows were on the table, and she frowned slightly and said in distress. What do you want to draw? Yang Yi asked with a smile. His hands were not idle, and he picked up some vegetables for the little girl with his chopsticks. Xixi did not look at her bowl. Her eyes were looking at the empty space above her father's head, as if she was thinking. She pouted and said, I want to draw a super beautiful drawing. Then the teacher will like it, and everyone will like it. Then we can win the prize. But this idea was a little too naive. Xixi was obviously aware of some of the difficulties. She held her cheek with her left palm and looked cute and worried. She muttered, but I can't draw, and I don't know how to draw with chalk. It's too difficult to draw a super beautiful drawing. Yang Yi understood what she wanted to express and said with a smile, Papa knows. You want to draw a simple but beautiful drawing, right? Xixi finally came to her senses. She looked at her father and nodded. The little girl's big eyes were full of eagerness. She hoped that her father would give her some ideas. Yang Yi touched his chin and said, A simple, beautiful and interesting drawing. What should I draw? He did not have a particularly good idea at the moment, but since Xixi asked him for help, he could not disappoint Xixi. He looked around and glanced at the bowls, chopsticks, and ingredients in the dining room. He glanced at Xixi's body, the lights on the wall, the flower arrangement, and other decorations. Finally, his eyes fell on the 3 British short-hairs who were enjoying their dinner. At this time Dodo Gray and Xiao Guai buried their heads in their bowls. The cat food that Yang Yi the poop picker had prepared for them was as delicious as always. They enjoyed it very much. Xiao Guai seemed to have felt Yang Yi's gaze. It raised its round face and met Yang Yi's eyes. At this moment, there seemed to be a familiar background music. After confirming the look, I met the right meow. Chapter 1000. Xixi, do you still have the crayons that I bought for you? Give them to me, and I'll teach you how to draw a cute and good-looking cartoon character. Yang Yi said to Xixi with a smile. She knew that her father had a lot of magical ideas. Okay. Xixi was full of joy. She answered with a crisp voice, put down her chopsticks and ran upstairs. Murphy chased after Tong Tong to feed him again. The little guy was getting more and more difficult to deal with. Not only did he run around, but he also refused to open his mouth after being coaxed for a long time. Murphy was exhausted by him every meal. Murphy came back from the living room with a bowl in her hand. She saw Xixi running upstairs and saw that there was still some food left in Xixi's bowl. She frowned and asked, Why did Xixi run upstairs? She didn't even eat. Yang Yi said with a smile, I asked her to get her crayons. Wasn't she talking about the blackboard just now? I thought of a drawing that she could draw on the blackboard. That's because you indulged her. If she's only willing to take a bite after being fed, she'll be done for. Murphy said reproachfully. Okay. Don't worry. I'll go feed Momo. I can teach her how to draw anytime. Yang Yi saw that Murphy was angry, so he quickly coaxed her. Yang Yi could understand Murphy's irritation. Tong Tong was usually well-behaved, but since he started to walk happily, eating became a big problem for him. Not to mention that Murphy would lose her temper. Sometimes Yang Yi would feed him, but he still couldn't finish a bowl of porridge after an hour. Every time the spoon reached out, his mouth would still be full. Yang Yi was so angry that he wanted to spank his little butt. Murphy couldn't lose her temper when she saw Yang Yi like this. She smiled and said, Okay, don't coax me. I'll feed you. You'll be angrier than me later. Murphy scooped up some scrambled eggs with tomatoes, which Tong Tong liked to eat, and went to the living room with the bowl. This was going to be a long battle. Papa, here you are. Shishi came downstairs quickly. She held a crayon box and a sketchbook and shouted excitedly. In order to see her father draw, the little girl picked up her small bowl and wanted to run to her father's side. Finish your meal first. We'll draw later. Otherwise, your mother will be angry later. Yang stopped her. He winked at Shishi and signaled her to look at the living room. Open your mouth. Let Mom see if you've finished eating. Mo Fei's voice happened to come over at the same time. Although it was not scolding, the tone of her voice clearly showed her sternness. Shishi couldn't help but shrink her head. She turned her head and stuck her tongue out at her father. She seemed to be very scared. But looking at her giggling, it seemed that she was still very daring when she was with her father. It was finally time to draw at night. Yang Yi and Shishi sat side by side in front of the coffee table on the carpet in the living room. Because of the demonstration and teaching, Yang Yi placed the sketchbook on the coffee table so that Shishi could see it clearly. Let's assume that this is a blackboard. First of all, we have to draw a big circle on the blackboard. Do you see it? This might be a little difficult for you because you have to draw such a big circle on the blackboard. But it's okay. Take your time. You're using chalk, so you can use the blackboard eraser to modify it. Yang Yi picked up a black crayon and drew a circle on the paper easily. As he drew, he said, "Of course, I'm using a black crayon now. But when the time comes, you can use white chalk to draw the outline. After you finish drawing and coloring it, you can use the chalk eraser to carefully trace the outline." Shishi watched her father draw with rapt attention and nodded absent-mindedly. However, Shishi couldn't help but open her mouth wide when she saw how well her father drew the circle with his bare hands. She looked at her father's hand that was holding the crayon with admiration. Her father was so awesome. He drew so well. This circle is the head of the robot cat that I'm calling Ding Dang. Yang Yi said with a smile. A little bell? Shishi reacted quickly and turned to look at her father in surprise. Little Belle was her friend in kindergarten. Fortunately, Shishi had a good memory. If it were Lon Xian, she definitely wouldn't remember it. It's not Little Belle. It's called Ding Dang. Yang Yi smiled and wrote these 3 words in the blank space next to him. He said, "Why is it called Ding Dang? Look, we're going to draw a small collar here. We're going to draw a small circle in the middle, and write AT in the middle. Look, doesn't it look like a bell that jingles? We used to bring it to steamed bun. Because it jingles, we call it Ding Dang." Yang Yi realized that no matter how he explained, it was related to bells. However, at this time, Shishi didn't care about the difference between bells and jingles. She nodded her little head happily and snuggled closer to her father. She rested her face on her father's arm and watched him draw with rapt attention. Next, we're going to draw the outline of its body. Look, these 2 short ones are its arms and the round ones are its hands. Then we're going to draw its body and feet here. The feet are in the shape of an oval, flatter than an egg. Yang Yi slowly drew for Shishi to see. His movements were very slow, as he was afraid that Shishi wouldn't understand. Under Yang Yi's strokes, a Ding Dang that stood in the most ordinary penguin position and had the most ordinary smile gradually appeared in front of Shishi. Of course, with the help of the crayons, Yang Yi still had to color for Shishi to see the final result. Its body is blue from here to here. The collar is red, the bell is bright yellow, the inside of its mouth is red, and its tongue is orange. Yang Yi said as he colored. At this moment, a shadow suddenly loomed over from the side. Yang Yi and Shishi turned their heads instinctively. It's Tong Tong. Little Momo, who was wearing baggy pants, there were diapers inside, had one hand on the coffee table and the other hand behind his back like a wing. His body was slightly leaning forward, and he even arched his little butt. He was curiously moving closer to see what his father and sister were doing. However, when his peeping was discovered, his father and sister both looked at him. Little Momo felt guilty. He blinked his eyes, turned around and ran out of the living room. He didn't even know if his father and sister were willing to let him stay and observe. Tong Tong's attempt to join in the fun was just a funny interlude. Yang Yi smiled as he came back to his senses. After he finished coloring the Ding Dang, he asked Shishi with a smile, "What do you think? Isn't this Ding Dang cute?" It's super cute. She loved it so much that she danced and screamed. She couldn't help but press her back against her father's big hand. She giggled and shook her little butt left and right. She didn't dare to disturb her father when he was painting. Now the little girl could finally express her love for Ding Dang with all her strength. Haha, let me tell you, if you paint this on the blackboard, a lot of people will like your blackboard bulletin. Yang Yi looked at Xishi's excited face and felt a little proud. He smiled and said, also, this is just the beginning. Let me teach you how to paint Ding Dang with more expressions and actions. Xishi had been learning how to paint for a long time, so Yang Yi didn't let her continue to watch. He spread out 2 pieces of sketch paper and asked Xishi to pick up a crayon to paint with him. Xishi's first time painting was not very successful. The circles were crooked, but it had to be said that Xishi was very talented in painting. She drew Ding Dang's body proportions very well. She just needed to practice. However, when Xishi was coloring Ding Dang, she suddenly made a big discovery. She turned her head in surprise and said, "Hey Papa, Ding Dang's body is also blue. It's a little like Xiao Guai, Xiao Hui and Dodo." Well, Xiao Guai and the others aren't as blue as Ding Dang. Not only were they similar, but the flat face was also the same. Yang Yi told Xishi half of the truth, because I got the inspiration for Ding Dang from Xiao Guai and the others. Also, I thought of a very interesting story for Ding Dang. I'll tell you before you go to bed tonight. Okay, there's another story to listen to. Cece was overjoyed. She couldn't help but stand up and cheer beside her father with her 2 little arms raised. However, Xishi was still thinking about her blackboard bulletin. After the excitement, she quickly sat down and said to her father energetically, "Papa, let's paint Ding Dang first. I want to paint Ding Dang super nice." Chapter 1001. On Thursday, the Blackboard Bulletin preparation team gathered again during recess. Xishi couldn't wait to show her friends the prototype of Ding Dang that Yang Yi had drawn for her yesterday. "Wow, what is this? A cat?" Du Yuqian asked excitedly. "No, this is Ding Dang. It's a robot that can talk." "No, it's a Doraemon. It's called Ding Dang." Lu Xiaoyu, who had already seen it, couldn't wait to help Xishi explain. Obviously, Ding Dang was still very popular among the children. Not to mention Du Yuqian, Yu Xiaowei, and Nan Zhaoyu, who had seen it for the first time. Lan Xian and Lu Xiaoyu had seen it from Xishi in the morning, and now they were still looking at it reluctantly. "Yes, it's called Ding Dang." Xishi giggled and proudly said to her friends, "This was drawn by my papa. Moreover, my papa also told me the story of Ding Dang and Nobita. It's super interesting." "Big Bear?" Yu Xiaowei was a little curious and couldn't help but interrupt. She whispered, "Is it a bear or a panda? I learned in science class that bears and pandas are different." Unfortunately, Xishi didn't give her a chance to show her knowledge. The little girl smiled and said, "Hee hee, it's not a big bear or a panda. It's a boy called Nobita." "A boy?" Du Yuqian's eyes lit up. She pointed at Nan Zhaoyu and smiled. "Nan Zhaoyu is also a boy, so he's Nobita." "I don't want to be Nobita. I like Ding Dang." Nan Zhaoyu shook his head. However, at this time, Du Yuqian, Lan Xian, and the other little girls finally put the title of Nobita on Nan Zhaoyu's head. Of course, this was just a joke. When they heard Shishi's brief story of Nobita finding a Doraemon from the future in a drawer, and how this Doraemon named Ding Dang could take out many magical toys from the bag on its belly, no one wanted Nan Zhaoyu to be Nobita anymore. "I want to be Nobita too," Lu Xiaoyu said enviously. "I also want to have a Ding Dang at home." Of course, at this meeting, they did not come to listen to Shishi's story. Everyone had their own division of labor. Although Shishi's arrangement was not very clear, and even a little chaotic, it was now time to report their progress. At this time, Nan Zhaoyu was the most active. He was not like Lu Xiaoyu, who was forgetful, nor was he like Lan Xian, who was procrastinating. Shishi asked him for help, and the little boy finished his task early. He excitedly puffed out his chest, and his eyes were shining with confidence. He said, "Shishi, I found the poem. My father helped me find it, and he found a lot of them. He even taught me how to write them." Unfortunately, his handsomeness lasted for only 2 seconds. Nan Jiaoyu quickly scratched his head and said embarrassedly, "But my father hasn't helped me write all of them, so I can look at them and write them on the blackboard." "Then what should we do?" Du Yuqian tilted her head doubtfully and looked at Nan Jiaoyu. It was as if he had not said anything. "It's okay, I can recite it for you. Is that okay?" "My father was not free yesterday, so I have to wait for him to finish writing," Nan Jiaoyu said quickly. "Sure. I want to hear Nan Jiaoyu recite the poem." Shishi nodded straightforwardly. "That's right. Nan Jiaoyu could recite poems in kindergarten." Lan Xian also praised him tacitly. "Then I'll recite it for you." Encouraged, Nan Jiaoyu puffed out his chest and raised his head slightly. As if he was reciting aloud, he recited in a loud and clear voice, the long ballad, "The flowers in the green garden. The morning dew waits for the morning sun." Note: this is a poem from the Han Dynasty. The history of this world began to diverge after the Three Kingdoms. Oh, Xiaohan can't just make up a poem to fool everyone. Sure enough, boys who can recite poems are different. Nan Jiaoyu immediately received Sister Xiaowei's surprised gaze, and Du Yuqian's and the others' surprised and worshipful gazes. This made the little boy's interest even more intense. He used a cadence to recite the rest of the poem while shaking his head. "Bad luck. 100 rivers flow from the east to the sea, when will they return to the west? If the young don't work hard, the old will be sad." This kid actually exceeded his usual performance. In the end, he really recited the poem with a sad tone. If someone secretly recorded this scene and posted it on the internet, Nan Jiaoyu would definitely make many netizens laugh at him for pretending to be an adult. No, pretending to be an old man's tone. But at this moment, in the eyes of the few inexperienced girls, Nan Jiaoyu's performance was still very impressive. They all looked at Nan Jiaoyu with some admiration. Actually, if there was more praise, Nan Jiaoyu would be happier. But the girls didn't know how to praise or what words to use. For a moment, the atmosphere was silent and awkward. Only Shishi opened her mouth. She asked excitedly, "Is there more? Is there more?" "Yes," Nan Jiaoyu said happily. Yang Yi drove alone to the office building of the Binhai District Backwave Technology Company. Today's Backwave Technology Company was no longer the simple startup company formed by student programmers. After a few years of formal development, it had also become a major benchmark for social software in the domestic technology industry. The market value continued to rise. Although it wasn't listed yet, and no one knew how much power it could explode, Holang Technologies, which was sitting on Weibo and WeChat, had become a large company that was on equal footing with the previously dominant SNS. Especially at the end of last year, when WeChat was launched through the soft promotion of China's Voice, as well as the huge investment in the Spring Festival Gala, the number of registered users skyrocketed. Because WeChat and microbroadcasting could connect users and share friends' information, and because WeChat had better mobile communication and social experience, as well as many other factors, many microbroadcasting users were willing to download and use the instant messaging and communication software. Many of the original SNS users also switched sides and used the software that was more suitable for their mobile phones. The rise of WeChat made SNS realize the danger they were in. They realized that Backwave Technology Company was no longer a small company that they could ignore. It was no longer a harmless company that didn't affect SNS deeply. This guy wanted to destroy SNS. SNS definitely wouldn't sit back and watch. They had already launched their counterattack. On one hand, they were using the time to develop and improve their own SNS mobile app to improve the user experience, so that they could compete with WeChat. On the other hand, they were trying to use public opinion, patent wars, and other means to stop WeChat's development. Yang Yi came to Backwave Technology Company this time for this big event. Mao Peifu welcomed Yang Yi into the upper management office of Backwave Technology Company. Along the way, many employees were curiously sizing up this masked man. It had to be said that Yang Yi did a great job of keeping his identity a secret, so that his life wouldn't be affected. At Backwave Technology Company, other than a few old employees who didn't know how to leak secrets, very few new employees knew that he was the big boss. Hence, there was a lot of discussion below. Who is he? Looks like CEO Mao, General Lao, and the rest respect him a lot. I don't know, but his back looks a little familiar. Could it be our company's mysterious boss? I don't think so. Look at his dressing, and his height. He's quite handsome, more like a celebrity. How could our boss be so young? That's true. Sigh, he really does look familiar. Why can't I remember? Which celebrity is he? Chapter 1002. In terms of the battle of public opinion, Backwave Technology Company, with its micro-broadcasting base, wasn't afraid of SNS retaliation. However, Mao Peifu, who had returned from the United States and was now in charge of WeChat's business, didn't want to be on the defensive. She wanted to strike first. Our current idea is to develop a minigame where we can share our results and invite friends to PK with us. Mao Peifu reported to Yang Yi. Mao Peifu's team's strategy didn't deviate from Yang Yi's previous plan of having them hype up the domestic version of Facebook and then sell it. However, Yang Yi could tell that they had put in a lot of effort. After all, it was quite far-sighted of them to think of using their friends to share their results. If we develop our own minigame, why don't we create a platform and invite other teams to develop minigames for our users? Yang Yi was talking about a mini-program, but implementing it wasn't easy. It would take a long time to create and test it. However, there are a lot of technical problems that need to be solved. It's not suitable for our current tense situation. You can think of it as a long-term plan. Mao Peifu quickly noted it down. Yang Yi had been in charge of the company for a long time. Although he hadn't been involved in the specific operations, he had always been able to point out the direction for everyone. It could be said that they now had a superstitious trust in Yang Yi. Your strategy makes sense, but we don't need to develop it ourselves. Yang Yi smiled lightly. You can contact some of the popular games right now, especially mobile games, and ask them to open up a platform for us to share our results. Not only can we share it with our friends, but we can also share it with micro-broadcasting. We have the largest user base in the country. As long as they aren't short-sighted, they won't reject our request to work with us. Also, I want you to develop a feature that will allow us to defeat SNS in one fell swoop. Yang Yi finally became serious. At this time, in the conference room, whether it was Mao Peifu or Backwave Technology Company's CEO Lao Baihua, also known as General Lao, they all sat up straight and listened attentively. This feature will allow people nearby to. After a long meeting with the people from the Backwave Technology Company in Binhai District, Yang Yi went straight to Wuhu District to pick up Shishi. However, the little girl was a little unhappy today. After hugging her father, she sat in the back of the car with a worried frown. Even though she was talking to Lan Xian about what happened in class today, Yang Yi could hear the gloominess in her voice. Of course, before Yang Yi asked, Shishi, under the guidance of Lan Xian, couldn't wait to tell her father about the thing that made her depressed. Papa, Xianair, and the others all said that the ding-dang I drew on the blackboard was not good. It doesn't even look like ding-dang anymore. I don't think my drawing looks good, but the blackboard is too big. I can't draw well. The little girl complained to her father. I also think it's hard to draw. The blackboard is so big, and we all have to stand on the table. As Lan Xian said, she giggled, ignoring Shishi's sadness. Then Shishi drew the ding-dang, which is super fat. It doesn't look good. A Doraemon with Dabai's figure appeared in Yang Yi's mind. Stop talking. I'm so sad. Cece pulled on Lan Xian's arm with a reproachful expression. Hee, I won't talk about it. Lan Xian naughtily stuck out her little tongue at Shishi. Papa, can you help me? Help me draw the ding-dang. I want a cute ding-dang. I don't like fat ding-dang. Shishi turned to her father, hugged the back of her father's driver's seat, stuck out her little head, and said with a pout. Yang Yi could certainly help Shishi draw, but Yang Yi felt that if he helped Shishi draw, Shishi would lose the opportunity to practice. Moreover, what could be happier than him and his friends working hard to complete the blackboard, and then being praised by others? However, Yang Yi could not stand by and watch. Obviously, Shishi also encountered a big problem that troubled her, and she needed someone to guide her. Isn't tomorrow Friday? Yang Yi said with a smile. Tomorrow afternoon, when Papa picks you up, let's see how to draw the ding-dang on the blackboard together in the classroom, okay? Don't worry, there will be a way when the time comes. Okay. When Shishi saw that her father had agreed to help her, she immediately smiled happily, and the little depression on her face was swept away. She said sweetly, Papa is the best. Han-sun was a big V of micro-broadcasting who specialized in gossip news. His micro-broadcasting account, Hansiensen Entertainment Express, often posted some groundless gossip. Although the authenticity of these rumors remained to be verified, it had to be said that these extremely exaggerated headlines still earned him a lot of attention. However, Han-sen's status in the micro-broadcasting gossip circle was not high, because he was not like LVU, who was a paparazzi and had his own paparazzi team. Han-sen was completely alone. Moreover, he relied on some of his own unique tricks to get the photos, and relied on his thick skin to fabricate stories to brew those half-true and half-false gossip. These days you can't earn money by being honest. If you want to earn attention, you have to rely on your thick skin. Tonight, Han-sun searched for the names of some stars on micro-broadcasting to see if he could catch some big news that the paparazzi missed from the micro-broadcasting of passers-by. This was one of Han-sen's secrets to fighting alone. Of course, the efficiency of doing so was also very low. Catching gossip news like this was tantamount to looking for a needle in a haystack. Fortunately, Han-sun, who was an otaku and an internet addict, had plenty of time. However, Han-sun did not expect that there would be a harvest so soon today. A mysterious person came to our company today. He looks like Yang Yi. Han-sun searched for Yang Yi's name. After scrolling through several pages, he finally saw a micro-broadcasting that made him feel refreshed. Clicking on the accompanying picture of this micro-broadcasting, Han-sun saw a vague back. The photo taken by this person was a little blurry and could not be seen clearly. However, it didn't matter. Han-sun had a way. He clicked on the micro-broadcasting homepage of the person who posted the micro-broadcasting. He opened the people he followed and checked them one by one. Finally, his efforts paid off. Han-sun finally found a micro-broadcasting sent by someone who seemed to be his colleague in the list of people he followed. Why is the company so serious today? General Lau and Chairman Mao are out together to welcome a very young person. Could he be our big boss? Hehe, I'm just guessing. The text of this micro-broadcasting had nothing to do with Yang Yi. However, Han-sun could tell at a glance that the office environment in this photo was the same as the previous photo. Moreover, the tall man wearing a mask was indeed dressed the same as the previous photo. This is Yang Yi. Han-sun was used to this job. In fact, he was not much different from the paparazzi. How sharp were his eyes! He immediately recognized the person in the photo. It was Yang Yi. Wait! Han-sun was excited and said to himself, in this photo, why is there a micro-broadcasting doll on that person's desk? Han-sun glanced at the location sent by the micro-broadcasting again. He could not help but breathe heavily. He moved his fingers excitedly and searched for the location of the micro-broadcasting company. Chapter 1003. At 4:50 p.m. on Friday, Yang Yi arrived at the entrance of Huijia Primary School early, just like the other parents who were waiting for their children to finish school. However, Yang Yi had to guide Shishi in her drawing today, so he didn't just wait at the school entrance. Yang Yi casually used an excuse to register with the guard and walked in. Yang Yi was very familiar with Shishi's classroom, so he easily walked to the building where Shishi was. When Yang Yi arrived, the classroom was still quiet and empty. But soon as the bell rang, the whole school seemed to be boiling with excitement. Not long after, every corner of the school was filled with all kinds of excited shouts. It was the same for the first grade building. Children who had just finished their interest classes quickly emerged in the corridor. There were also children who packed their bags before going to their interest classes and went straight home after school, like Shishi sometimes. However, there were still many children who went back to class before going home. Some of them were on duty to clean the classroom, so they hurried back, wanting to quickly finish sweeping and go home. But why was there an adult standing outside the classroom? They first looked at Yang Yi strangely, then lowered their voices and whispered to each other as they ran to the back of the classroom to get brooms and spatulas. Although they were very curious about Yang Yi's identity, children at this age didn't know Liang Jingru, so they didn't have the courage to take the initiative to talk to an unfamiliar adult. Of course, they also didn't remember seeing Xishi's father at last year's parent-teacher conference. Children at this age wouldn't remember these things. Yang Yi was afraid of scaring these children, so he wore an amiable smile. His eyes swept over the children running by from time to time, hoping to see the figure of the little girl he was worried about. Excian air, we have to go up. We still have to draw and can't go home. Downstairs, Yang Yi caught a clear cry that was mixed in with the noise of many children. Yang Yi stuck his head out to take a look, and the corners of his mouth curled up slightly. Sure enough, after a while, Xishi and Lan Xian, the two little girls who went to the library for reading class, ran up. Papa. Xishi was pleasantly surprised to see her father. The little girl didn't think that her father would come up so early. She screamed and happily threw herself at her father and hugged him tightly. Seeing Xishi and Lan Xian leading a tall and burly adult into the classroom, several boys who were sweeping the floor suddenly widened their eyes and looked at Yang Yi with some fear. When they were outside, they didn't feel anything. But when the adult walked into the classroom, in the small space his tall and burly figure suddenly gave them a terrible pressure. They were like kittens that saw a big tiger and didn't dare to say a word. In the middle of the classroom, there was a little girl who was packing her school bag. When she saw this scene, she ran over curiously and got close to Xishi and whispered, "Xishi, who is this uncle?" This little girl seemed to have a good relationship with Xishi. "This is my papa." Xishi giggled and looked very happy. She took the initiative to introduce, "Papa, this is Yuqian. We are going to do the blackboard bulletin together." It turned out to be the little girl Du Yuqian. Yang Yi smiled and nodded to her. Du Yuqian was more surprised. Her eyes widened and she said in surprise, "You are Xishi's father? The father who drew Ding Dang?" Well, there seemed to be a problem with the logic of this question. After exchanging pleasantries for a while, Yang Yi was pulled to the back of the classroom by Xishi, who couldn't wait any longer. Xishi pointed to the big blackboard at the back and eagerly waited for her father to teach her how to draw Ding Dang. In the past week, Xishi and her friends had put a lot of effort into the blackboard bulletin. Now several areas had been planned on the blackboard and were outlined with beautiful lace. At least in terms of design, Yang Yi felt that these little girls had done a good job. One of the areas had been filled in with content. It was probably a poem that Nan Xiaoyu helped to copy when Xishi drew Ding Dang yesterday. Yang Yi took a look and found that Nan Xiaoyu's handwriting was not bad. Every stroke was written beautifully and powerfully. Compared with his father, the great calligrapher Naniyun, there was still a big gap. However, among these first-grade children, he could definitely be called a crane in a flock of chickens. And this poem was actually the long ballad. Yang Yi felt that the last two sentences were quite suitable for these children. "These patterns were all designed by you? That's a good idea. By separating the content, it won't look too messy and it's much more refreshing." Yang Yi smiled with appreciation. "This is what Sister Xiaowei taught us. Many classes in the 3rd grade draw it like this." Cici blinked her eyes and said, "I drew it here." Du Yuqian couldn't help but interrupt. She waved her little hand in front of the blackboard and even jumped, gesturing to Yang Yi. "I also drew it. I drew it here." Lan Xian saw the situation and couldn't wait to take credit. "You are all very good. Well done." Yang Yi smiled and praised. "But it still needs to have Ding Dang to really look good." Xishi pouted and said sullenly, "Dad, don't just look at it." She had been waiting to draw Ding Dang. Xishi had already erased what she drew yesterday. Now there was a large blank space in the middle of the blackboard. Xishi was eager to draw it earlier so that the friends who laughed at her drawing of Ding Dang yesterday could look at her in a new light. Coming. Wait for Dad to get something." Yang Yi smiled and walked back to the podium. How to teach Xishi how to draw a Ding Dang on a big blackboard. Yang Yi had already thought about this problem at home. He took a wooden triangular ruler from the podium that was given to teachers by the school. Seeing Yang Yi take out such a big gesture, let alone Shishi. Even Lan Xian came over to watch curiously. Du Yuqian Nan Zhaoyu, who just came to help, and a few other children followed Yang Yi. Shishi, when you want to draw a picture on such a big blackboard, you have to learn the composition. Yang Yi pressed the triangular ruler on the blackboard, turned his face, and said to Shishi with a smile, "You have to think about how to move the picture on the blackboard according to the correct proportion." Shishi didn't understand these nouns at all. She looked at her father with some confusion, waiting for him to explain. But fortunately, Shishi didn't need to fully understand these principles. Soon, she saw her father take the original copy of the ding-dang that she used to copy. He gestured to her and said, "Look, this ding-dang, isn't it the head? It's the same proportion as the body, right? The head is a little bigger here, but it's actually not that big, right?" Shishi nodded gently. She understood this. Yang Yi took the triangular ruler again and gestured in the big blank space in the middle of the blackboard. He used the chalk to poke small dots and dotted lines on it. "Let's plan it like this. You can draw the head of the ding-dang in this area. Of course, we've left a space for the dragonfly. The next area, draw the body. The space is about the same as the head, but when you draw it, you can draw it a little smaller. Little dots and dotted lines." After a while, Shishi, who was watching her father work with all her attention, was surprised to see that there were areas on the blackboard that could be filled with various parts of the ding-dang. Her father seemed to be helping her break down a very complicated picture into simple parts by simple decomposition. Her father was so amazing. Shishi's eyes lit up as she looked at her father with admiration. "Can you see it?" Yang Yi turned his head and saw Shishi's expression. He knew that his strategy had succeeded. He smiled and asked, "Isn't it much easier to draw like this?" Shishi nodded her little head happily. However, Du Yuqian, Lan Xian, and Nan Zhaoyu had never taken drawing lessons. They were not like Shishi, who had watched her father draw since she was a child. They were confused and shook their heads in confusion. They muttered, "I can't tell." Well, these children did not know how to compose a picture. They did not know how to draw a complete picture step by step from the beginning to the end. Naturally, there was no way for them to tell what the ding-dang looked like from Yang Yi's messy little dots and curves. "It's okay if you can't tell. Later, Shishi will draw it out and you'll see the effect." Yang Yi smiled and comforted them. Yang Yi moved an empty table over and said, "Come on, Shishi, it's your turn to draw." Shishi was eager to try, but she was not very confident. The little girl looked a little shy. She intertwined her two little hands and twisted her body on the spot. She whispered coquettishly, "Papa, can I draw it myself?" "Yes, you can draw it yourself. But Dad will be watching, and he will guide you to complete it. Don't worry," Yang Yi said encouragingly. Okay then." When Shishi heard that her father would guide her, she immediately regained her confidence. She smiled sweetly and actively stretched out her two little arms. Usually, she had to step on the stool before she could step on the table to draw. Now that her father was here, she did not need to go through so much trouble. Yang Yi reached out and hugged the little girl like a princess. She was carried and flew onto the table as if she was riding on clouds. Chapter 1004. Although she had her father's guidance, it wasn't possible for Shishi to draw a large ding-dang in such a short time. What's more, Shishi didn't draw very well at the beginning. She repeatedly erased it several times, until only the afterglow of the setting sun was left on the horizon. Only then did she gradually get into the mood, and draw the outline of the ding-dang. Of course, this was also because Yang Yi was just watching from the side and didn't help. If Yang Yi were to draw it, they would probably have gone home by now. It's worth mentioning that although her father didn't help, Shishi also showed a strong tenacity. It seemed to be different from her performance yesterday, when she was discouraged from drawing. Now the other children had gone home with their parents. Even Nan Zhaoyu, who came to help copy some articles, was taken home by his mother. In the classroom, only Lan Xian was left. She was still sitting on the chair by the side and waiting foolishly. Uncle Yang said that in order to reward her patience for waiting for so long, he would treat her to dinner tonight for free. Thus the little girl was relieved. Maybe it was because her father was watching by her side? She mustered all her strength and wanted to do something that she was interested in well. This scene made Yang Yi feel a little touched. But the progress was indeed a little slow. Yang Yi overestimated Xixi ability and underestimated the difficulty of the task. Well, let's come to school tomorrow to draw again. Yang Yi reached out and pulled Xixi's little hand, which was still moving towards the blackboard, and said with a smile. Xixi looked at her father with some confusion and said, But tomorrow is the holiday. We don't have to go to school. Yang Yi smiled and said, It's okay. Dad can borrow the key from your class teacher, and then bring you to school to draw alone. There's still a lot of time tomorrow. I'm sure you can draw it well. Now don't let your mother wait at home. Okay. Since her father said so, Xixi obediently agreed. She stretched out her two little arms and asked her father to carry her down. It was another arduous journey, but Xixi liked the feeling of hugging her father. Now that she had grown up, she rarely allowed her father to carry her while walking. Go wake Xian up. After Yang Yi put the little girl down, he smiled and pointed to Lan Xian. Lan Xian was so bored that she fell asleep on the chair. She tilted her little head and leaned comfortably against the back of the chair and slept. She didn't know what delicious food she was dreaming of, but she was almost drooling. Yang Yi went to clean up the table that Xixi had just stepped on. There was a cloth next to the window. Yang Yi took it and wiped the table clean. In addition, the used chalk was neatly put back into the chalk box. Xixi was responsible for waking Lan Xian up. The little girl took a big step and jumped in front of her good friend. Suddenly, she made a bang sound with her mouth, trying to scare her. Unfortunately, Xixi was not good at pranking others. Just as she made a sound, she couldn't help but giggle. She couldn't help it at all. Lan Xian, on the other hand, was startled by the sound. She raised her head in a daze and only came back to her senses when she saw Xixi laughing while hugging her belly. She wiped her mouth and mumbled in confusion. Huh? Ah. Is it time to eat? There will be food when we go back. We should go back. Yang Yi wiped the table clean, picked up the cloth, and said with a smile. Let's go. Xian, do you want to go to the bathroom? Xixi, you have to wash your hands too. After they finished cleaning up, they were ready to go home. Yang Yi walked out of the school gate with the two little guys. Wow, it's so late. Lan Xian looked at the reddish sky, and said in hindsight. Looking at her confused look, Yang Yi gently shook his head. When Lan Xian got in the car, he helped the little guy fasten her seatbelt. Xixi saw her father's head in front of them. She was talking to Lan Xian. Suddenly, the little girl exclaimed in a low voice, Oh! Yang Yi fastened Lan Xian's seatbelt. He thought there was an accident, so he quickly raised his head and asked, What's the matter? Xixi's beautiful big eyes blinked shyly. She pointed at her father's head, stuck out her little tongue, and said embarrassedly, Hee papa, there was the color of chalk on my hand, and then your hair turned white. Yang Yi gently touched the back of his head. He roughly understood that Xixi accidentally got the powder on her hand on the back of his head, when she came down with her arms around his neck. Papa, let me wipe it for you, Xixi said diligently. It doesn't matter. I'll wipe it when we go back. Yang Yi smiled and rubbed Xixi's little head with his clean hand. He didn't want Xixi's hand to get dirty, so he just washed it clean. However, Yang Yi returned to his driver's seat. Before getting in the car, he reached out and patted the back of his head. The news of Yang Yi's appearance in Backwave Technology Company was finally exposed by the entertainment broadcaster, Hans Jensen Entertainment Express, this weekend. Although Hans Jensen Entertainment Express didn't have as many fans as Schwarzeiba, the news he threw out this time was quite significant. Soon, it was reprinted by some well-known entertainment broadcasters, and even paid by some news websites. Yang Yi is the boss of micro-broadcasting? How is that possible? When many people saw this news, they felt that it was too ridiculous. How could a singer in the entertainment industry be the boss of such a huge company like micro-broadcasting? This was even more unbelievable than the first time many people heard that Hu Haikwan of the Yuchuan Group was an angel investor who played with capital. However, a lot of the evidence provided by Hans Jensen Entertainment Express made people feel that it was somewhat reasonable. Hansen didn't have any connections or abilities. He couldn't find out the real name of the boss of Backwave Technology Company, nor could he provide any concrete evidence. However, his ability to fabricate stories was top-notch. Other than the photos sent by the employees, the second evidence provided by Hansen was the history of Backwave Technology Company. This wasn't difficult to find on the internet. Microbroadcasting was born from a code written by a group of students from Jiangqing Media University. This was the official version. As everyone knew, Yang Yi used to live next to Jiangqing Media University. Now he even had a coffee shop there. However, due to the frequent harassment of reporters, Yang Yi rarely went to the coffee shop. Of course, it was still difficult to convince people with just these two pieces of evidence. The third piece of evidence provided by Hansen was really close to the truth. Back then, microbroadcasting had made a name for itself by relying on microbroadcasting movies. Especially during the first Microbroadcasting Cup micromovie competition, it was in full swing. Many outstanding filmmakers emerged from that competition, and now, many of them had made a name for themselves in the entertainment industry. Moreover, the biggest winner should be the fairy tale micromovie, which was used as a demonstration piece by microbroadcasting. This was considered a major milestone in the history of movies. Not only was it still exciting to watch, but the songs were also widely sung. Moreover, when the audience watched it now, they suddenly realized that this micromovie was filled with stars. This feeling was very magical. If everyone looked back and watched the low-budget comedy movies Nightclub and Crazy Stone, they would have the same feeling. Back then, the most famous person in this micromovie was Chin-won. The other actors and directors were unknown. However, looking at it now, everyone would be surprised to find that the male lead of this movie was actually the popular Guo Ziyi, a big star whose variety show ability and acting skills were recognized by the audience. And hidden in this movie was Yang Yi, who could be considered a big shot in the entertainment industry. The screenwriter of Fairy Tale, Yang Yi, the lyricist and composer of Fairy Tale, Muxiang, was also Yang Yi. After the exclamation, the onlookers finally faced the possibility of what Hansen said. If Yang Yi was not the boss of microbroadcasting, why did he happen to appear here? Why did Fairy Tale not seek fame or profit? Such an outstanding work was just used as a footnote for someone else's micromovie competition? Other than this, Hansen also posted a screenshot. It was the microbroadcasting that everyone knew was Yang Yi's, Shishi's family chef. The time when the first microbroadcasting was released could be said to be the time when microbroadcasting had not been promoted yet. Perhaps it was still in the internal testing stage? This was enough to prove that Yang Yi and microbroadcasting had a very deep relationship. So, Yang Yi was really the boss of microbroadcasting? After reading this news, many people forgot their previous thoughts that seemed to be nonsense and suddenly felt that it made sense. It seems that it's really possible. Microbroadcasting was Yang Yi's own backyard. After this news caused a certain degree of popularity, it had already been notified to Yang Yi. Even Lu Yu, who was roughly aware, called to ask Yang Yi if he needed help. Soon, on Saturday afternoon, Phoebe Studio and microbroadcasting officials issued an announcement, claiming that Yang Yi went to microbroadcasting's company only because he was invited by microbroadcasting to prepare a customized advertising song for them. They did not intend to explain to the public why there were so many coincidences between Yang Yi and microbroadcasting. However, such an announcement could at least calm some of the surprised voices. That's right. Although Yang Yi is already very powerful, how can he be the boss of microbroadcasting? That's too unbelievable. The onlookers changed sides one after another. If Boss Yang was the boss of microbroadcasting, this would be fun. He would definitely be the first to ban Han Xiansen's microbroadcasting. Yang Yi's fans also started to ridicule below. But now that Han Xiansen's microbroadcasting is still alive, it's obviously just a rumor. It seemed that this storm that had not yet brewed was about to die down. Was that really the case? Chapter 1005. Chao Yaoli was an ordinary third-year student at Jiangqing Media University. She majored in music. It was the weekend again. Her roommate, Hee-min, poked her head out from her bed and looked at Chow Yali, who was still reading a book on music anthropology. She couldn't help but complain. Lily, are you still reading a postgraduate book? Don't you want to rest on the weekend? Immediately, she suggested excitedly. Lily, the weather is so good today. Why don't we go shopping? I haven't bought clothes for a long time. Chow Yali didn't continue to be a straight-A student. She smiled and agreed with Hee-min's suggestion. The two of them changed their clothes and put on their makeup. After a long time, they carried their bags and went out, chatting and laughing. But at this moment, a girl from the dormitory next door opened the door with a phone in her hand. When she saw Chow Yali and Hee-min, she smiled and said, Hey Lily Hee-min, I was just looking for you. Why are you looking for us? Chow Yali and Hee-min asked curiously. Did you sign up to be a public judge for the new program of Jiangnan TV station? The girl waved the phone in her hand at them and said excitedly, The program team is now recruiting public judges from all over the country. New program? Hee-min asked in surprise. What new program? I'm a singer. Chow Yali had some impression of this. She asked in surprise. I'm a singer and they're recruiting public judges. What program is it? Hee-min was still confused. It's a new music variety program that Jiangnan TV station and Yang Yi are working on together this year. You know Yang Yi, right? He's the awesome person who messed with China's Voice. Chow Yali said with a smile. For music students like them, pop music was not as charming as classical music. Although there were also people who chased after stars, Chow Yali and Hee-min only listened to the songs and did not chase after stars as fanatically as others. I remember now Yang Yi, the guy who wrote Conquering Heaven. Hee-min's eyes lit up and said, I remember that he used to come to our academy to listen in. The teacher even mentioned his name. That's right. Chow Yali nodded and smiled. However, even though Chow Yali and Hee-min usually listened to classical tunes and old songs, Chow Yali and Hee-min's interest was piqued when they heard the news from their roommate next door. After all, they were all young people. They were still at the age where they were hot-blooded and active. How could they not be interested in this kind of limelight? Could there be some shady dealings? Hee-min asked worriedly. I heard that the audience tickets for these shows are given to those with connections. I don't think so. Their official micro-broadcasting has already said that the selection of the judges will adhere to the principle of fairness and justice. The list of the selected judges will also be made public online. The girl from the dormitory next door passed her phone to them and said, Look, they want to recruit people who love music and have a certain appreciation of music. They want to recruit people from all 5 age groups. The judges for each episode are different, so there will be a lot of spots. I think that music majors like us who are in Jiangcheng should have an advantage. Chow Yali and Hee-min huddled together and looked at their phones. After a while, the two of them looked at each other at the same time. They were both tempted. Shishi came back from school a little late. She and her father had lunch outside. However, the little girl, who had the habit of taking afternoon naps, couldn't resist the heavy sleepiness. It was already past 4 in the afternoon, but she was still sleeping soundly in her bedroom upstairs. However, at this time Lan Xian came to visit again. The little girl excitedly carried a small bag and ran into Yang Yi's unlocked yard. Uncle Yang, where's Shishi? Lan Xian's loud voice came from Yang Yi's house across 2 lawns and a flower bed. Yang Yi was watering the flower bed. Murphy and Tong Tong were playing next to him. The little girl was very interested in the small puddle of water that her father made on the ground when he watered the plants. She was excitedly running around and stepping on it. Shishi is still sleeping upstairs. Xian Air, do you have anything for Shishi? Yang Yi saw through Lan Xian's intention and asked with a smile. She's still sleeping. The sun is shining on her butt. Lan Xian came over and muttered loudly while looking at what Yang Yi was doing. She proudly lifted the bag in her hand and said to Yang Yi, This is the nougat my father brought back from Guangdong province. My father went to Guangdong province on a business trip. He brought me this nougat, which is super delicious. I brought some for Shishi. Yang Yi certainly knew that Lan Kai went to Guangdong province a few days ago to attend the quarterly shareholders meeting of Sahara Online Mall. Yang Yi, the second largest shareholder, didn't go. Lance Hao Kai should have come back this morning. When he came back, Yang Yi was drawing with Shishi at school. Lance Hao Kai called. However, the relationship between Lan Xian and Shishi was really good. There were not many people who could let her take the initiative to share her favorite candies. Of course, Shishi usually left some delicious food for Lan Xian. For example, before the new year, when Sister Ding Xiang came to make a cake at home, Shishi left some for Lan Xian. Lan Xian remembered Shishi's kindness. Nougat? This is not bad, but you can't eat too much at once. Otherwise, eating too much sugar will cause tooth decay. Yang Yi laughed. Lan Xian answered casually. When she saw Tong Tong, she took out a piece of nougat from the small bag and handed it to him enthusiastically. Tong Tong, come here. Sister Xian Air will give you a piece of nougat. Little Momo didn't know what nougat was, but when he heard the word sugar and saw the nougat wrapped in a candy wrapper, his eyes lit up. He walked out of the water with a grin on his face and ran over excitedly to take it. No, you're too young to eat it. Murphy quickly stopped him and signaled Lan Xian to put it away with her eyes. However, Tong Tong was smart now. The more his mother stopped him from eating it, the more he liked it. He shouted anxiously, No, no, I'll eat it. Yang Yi saw this and reached out to take it. He laughed and said, Okay. You can eat it, but not now. I have to cut it open for you before you can eat it. Since the nougat was a little hard, Yang Yi planned to cut it into small pieces. This way, the little guy wouldn't choke easily. Tong Tong was pestering his father, but his father picked him up with his big arms. He chuckled and brought him to the kitchen. Lan Xian blinked. She didn't understand why the adults said Tong Tong couldn't eat it, and then said he could eat it. Forget it. She didn't care about them and ran upstairs to find Shishi. You're tuning in to the Earbook Haven YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.